Chapter 63. Xian Yao and Puxi were not stupid. The Yibao Pavilion bought the stone ring for 700,000 spirit coins and sold it to Lin Tian at the original price. It seemed that they did not earn a single cent, or it could be said that they lost hundreds of thousands of spirit coins. However, if they could use these hundreds of thousands of spirit coins to get closer to this young genius, it was obviously more valuable. What do you think? Do you want it? Xian Yao giggled. Yes. Lin Tian did not hesitate. Although 700,000 spirit coins was a bit painful, the stone ring was worth this price. Oh, little brother, make it clear. Xian Yao's body leaned closer to Lin Tian. Her fragrance assailed his nostrils. Her voice was full of magnetic temptation. Little brother, do you want the stone ring or do you want sister? Lin Tian. This demoness. Hee hee. Xian Yao covered her mouth and laughed. Okay, I won't tease little brother anymore. Swaying her charming body, Xian Yao walked into a cabinet in the room. Soon after, she took out a small wooden box. When she opened the wooden box, there was a small stone ring in the wooden box. It looked very simple, like a small stone ring. Pour in a certain amount of true yuan and use your mind to control it. Then you can store and take things out, Xian Yao said. After she finished speaking, Xian Yao handed the small wooden box to Lin Tian. After receiving the wooden box, Lin Tian wore the stone ring on his right hand's middle finger and carefully poured a strand of Jin Yuan into it. Immediately, a sound rang out in his mind as the scene of a small space suddenly appeared in his mind, and there was nothing in it. How is it? How do you feel? Xian Yao asked. Let me try. Under the black robe, Lin Tian's voice came out. Holding the small wooden box with the stone ring in his right hand, Lin Tian moved his mind and the small wooden box disappeared in his hand. Then, with a move of his mind, the small wooden box appeared in his right hand again. Lin Tian's eyes lit up. It was really magical. Lin Tian had 700,000 spirit coins on him. Immediately, he paid all of them to Puxi. Shao family's 600,000 spirit coins, plus the 100,000 spirit coins from Shan Feng and Ning Yu's 2 spiritual weapons, it's exactly 700,000 spirit coins. This money came at the right time, Lin Tian thought to himself. Looking at the stone ring on his middle finger, Lin Tian couldn't help but smile. Little brother, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking of how to thank me? Xian Yao's voice rang in his ears. I will definitely thank you in the future. Lin Tian smiled. His mind was mature, he more or less knew why Xian Yao and Puxi treated him so well. Who needs you to thank me? Just remember that I treat you well. Xian Yao rolled her eyes at Lin Tian. I must remember. Lin Tian smiled. After staying in the Exchange Treasure Pavilion for another hour, Lin Tian stood up and said his goodbyes, returning to his residence in the martial house. When he arrived at the top of the pavilion, Lin Tian couldn't wait to test the stone ring again. He put the materials and other things in the pavilion into the stone ring one by one, and then took them out one by one. He only needed a single thought to retrieve items from his storage space, and this process made him feel exceptionally curious. With this little thing, it will save me a lot of trouble in the future, Lin Tian said with a smile. After putting the Guiyuan sword and a small dagger into the stone ring, Lin Tian took out the Lin family's property deed and the Shao family's property deed, smiled coldly, and put them into the stone ring. It's time to settle this with the Shao family, he said coldly to himself. After noon, Lin Tian walked through the streets of Fengjian City wrapped in a black robe. Soon, he arrived in front of a huge mansion that was as luxurious as the Shao family. There were 2 big words engraved on the door at the top of the mansion. Qin Mansion. Qin Mansion was where the Qin family lived. Like the Shao family, the Qin family was also one of the famous merchants in Fengjian City. Of course, compared to the current Shao family, the Qin family was much worse. Stop! In front of the Qin Mansion, 2 strong guards came forward and blocked Lin Tian's path. Staring at Lin Tian wrapped in a black robe, the two strong men were vigilant. Under the black robe, Lin Tian's expression didn't change as he took out the array controller badge. This is? The two guards' expressions changed at the same time. As guards of the Qin family, they were both in the second level of the body refining realm, so they naturally knew about the array controller badge. I want to see the head of the Qin family. Lin Tian lowered his voice and said. The two guards nodded and said respectfully, Okay. Please wait a moment, I'll go and report to the head of the family. With that, one of them quickly ran into the Qin mansion. About half an hour later, a middle-aged man walked in hurriedly. It was the head of the Qin family, Qin Luo. The visit of a second-level array controller was a big deal. Even the head of the Qin family didn't dare to neglect it. Sir, are you looking for me? Outside the mansion, Qin Luo looked at Lin Tian wrapped in a black robe and asked cautiously. Yes. Under the black robe, Lin Tian lowered his voice. Can we talk inside? Qin Luo was stunned and then nodded. Of course. Sir, please come in, Qin Luo said respectfully. Following Qin Luo, Lin Tian came to a luxurious main hall. Come on, bring the best Longjing tea, Qin Luo shouted outside. A second-level array controller came to visit. At this moment, Qin Luo's face was both excited and timid. No need. Under the black robe, Lin Tian lowered his voice and said, Head of the Qin family, close the door and don't let anyone disturb you. And don't let anyone get close to this room. I have something important to discuss with head of the Qin family. Qin Luo was slightly surprised and immediately nodded and quickly ordered according to Lin Tian's request. Squeak! Qin Luo closed the door tightly. Sir, is this okay? Qin Luo asked cautiously. A second-level array controller was a godlike existence for a wealthy merchant family like the Qin family. Qin Luo didn't dare to be careless at all. Lin Tian nodded, faced Qin Luo, and slowly took off his black robe. Opposite him, Qin Luo's pupils suddenly widened. Lin Tian? It's you! Qin Luo's face was full of shock, and then anger appeared in her eyes. What are you doing? Do you think the Qin family is a toy? The Lin family used to be the largest merchant family in Fengjian City, so Qin Luo naturally knew the young master of the Lin family. Head of the Xiao family, you changed your attitude quite quickly, Lin Tiantan said indifferently. How dare you? Who do you think you are? How dare you talk to me like this? Qin Luo shouted. Aren't I a second-level array controller? Lin Tian sat down and still looked calm. Besides, I told you not to let anyone disturb me here, so I advise you again, you'd better keep your voice down. Second-level array controller? You! Where did you get a fake coat of arms to trick me? Qin Luo's face darkened. Fake coat of arms? Who dares to make a fake array controller coat of arms in Fengjian City? Lin Tian chuckled and said. Also, a month ago in the Yibao Pavilion, you and Xiao Nan fought over the 3 martial fusion pattern scrolls. You should remember that I was the one who made those 3 martial fusion pattern scrolls. What? Hearing this, Qin Luo's face changed drastically. You don't believe me? Do you want me to demonstrate it to you on the spot? With that, Lin Tian raised his right hand, and the Longjing tea was sucked into his hand. Then he engraved a martial fusion pattern on a famous painting on the wall of the main hall. Of course, this martial fusion pattern had no effect at all. Sorry, I ruined your painting, Lin Tiantan said indifferently. You won't make me pay for it, right? Qin Luo widened her eyes, stared at the martial fusion pattern that Lin Tian engraved, and swallowed hard. Looking at Lin Tian again, Qin Luo's face was full of smiles. Well, nephew Lin, just now. Qin Luo's heart palpitated. After hearing Lin Tian say that he and Xiao Nan fought over the martial fusion pattern, and seeing Lin Tian engrave the martial fusion pattern with the Longjing tea, although she didn't know much about array controllers, she no longer doubted Lin Tian in the slightest. The downtrodden young master of the Lin family was now a second-stage array controller. Unexpected! Unexpected! Nephew Lin has now achieved such brilliant achievements. I think he will definitely revive the Lin family in the future," Qin Luo said passionately. Lin Tianyi waved his hand. "Okay, don't say false words." With a shake of his right hand, a scroll of parchment suddenly appeared in Lin Tian's right hand. "This is?" Qin Luo was shocked. Just now, there was nothing in Lin Tian's hand, but in the blink of an eye, a scroll of parchment appeared. For Qin Luo, this scene was really unbelievable. Immediately, she became more cautious of Lin Tian. "Nephew Lin, this is?" Qin Luo asked carefully. Lin Tian didn't speak. He raised his hand and threw the scroll to Qin Luo. Qin Luo took it, glanced at it, and suddenly her face changed again. The Xiao family's house deed. Qin Luo's eyes widened. How could something so important to the Xiao family be in Lin Tian's hands? She glanced at it, and then her face changed again. The owner of the house deed was actually Lin Shi. This was obviously the Xiao family's house deed. Surprised? Lin Tian's voice was calm. "Look at these again." He raised his hand, and a thick stack of property deeds flew out. Lin's wood, Lin's horse farm, Lin's jade, Lin's jewelry, Zhao's real estate, Zhao's animal husbandry, Zhao's fishery. Qin Luo's hands trembled as she flipped through nearly 20 property deeds one by one. Then she found that the last owner of these property deeds was the name Lin Shi. Lin Shi, Lin Tian's sister. Qin Luo naturally knew her. This, you are. Qin Luo's face was aghast, and her hands were shaking. As the master of the Qin family, such a rich business family, she naturally understood what these property deeds meant. This meant that now Lin Shi Lin Tian was the real master of the Xiao family. The lifeline of the Xiao family was now completely in the hands of Lin Tian. You should understand. Lin Tian looked at Qin Luo. So, how about cooperating with me and playing a game together? Game? What game? Qin Luo said in a trembling voice. She was a big shot in Fengjian City, more than 30 years older than Lin Tian. But at this moment, facing Lin Tian, Qin Luo, the master of the Qin family, looked frightened. Chapter 64. Rex. What? Hearing Lin Tian's words, Qin Luo's face changed greatly, and she couldn't help but take a step back. Go, destroy the Xiao family? Lin Tian glanced at Qin Luo indifferently. Nervous? Scared? Or excited? Well? Qin Luo blushed. But, she had fantasized about the destruction of the Xiao family countless times, but at this moment, when she heard the words, destroy the Xiao family, from Lin Tian, Qin Luo was frightened and her face was full of horror. But what? Lin Tian said indifferently. Looking at Lin Tian, Qin Luo said cautiously, the Qin family and the Xiao family have no grudge against each other. If we go, destroy the Xiao family now, it seems a little unjustified. Lin Tian looked at Qin Luo meaningfully, and then smiled faintly. You'll get the justification you want, Lin Tian now said. After destroying the Xiao family, the properties of the Xiao family and the Lin family will be handed over to the Qin family to manage. The Qin family will get 20% of the profits, and I'll get 80%. Are you satisfied with this cooperation? Qin Luo's eyes widened, and she stared at Lin Tian. Not satisfied? Lin Tian narrowed his eyes. Yes. Qin Luo nodded repeatedly and said excitedly, let's do as you say. The Xiao family and the Lin family had nearly 20 properties in total, and they were all developing well. With 20 properties combined, even if the profit was only 20%, it was still an amazing amount. Although the Qin family would have to spend a lot of effort to manage them, it was absolutely worth it for the 20% profit. Then, shall we go to the Xiao family now? Qin Luo asked tentatively. Lin Tian shook his head. No hurry. Summon the capable people of the Qin family, take these property deeds to the locations of the properties, and take them over first. With that, Lin Tian handed all the property deeds except the Xiao family's property deeds to Qin Luo. With the property deeds in hand, It won't take long with the capable people of the Qin family, will it? Nephew Lin, don't worry. With the property deeds, 4 hours will be enough, Qin Luo said seriously. All right, go then. I'll wait here. After you're done with everything, we'll head to the Shao clan, Lin Tiantan said coldly. Qin Luo nodded heavily and pushed open the door with a creak. Men! Qin Luo shouted. Outside the door, many Qin family members quickly gathered. Judging from the standard of an ordinary person, these people's spirits were astonishing. They were obviously the elites of the Qin family. Under Qin Luo's instructions, these people formed a team of 3. Then each of them held a title deed and quickly retreated without any hesitation. Qin Luo walked back to the room. Nephew Lin, let's wait for the good news. Lin Tian nodded. The Qin clan's servants brought over new Longjing tea and some snacks. In the blink of an eye, 3 hours had passed. Reporting to the Patriarch. The takeover of Lin's wood industry has been completed. A Qin family disciple came to report. In the room, Lin Tian nodded with a calm expression. Qin Luo waved her hand at the door, and the disciple of the Qin family quickly left. Reporting to the Patriarch. Lin's jade artifacts have been received. Reporting to the Patriarch. Lin's horse farm has been taken over. Reporting to the Patriarch. Zhao's fishing industry has been taken over. Reporting to the Patriarch. Lin's jewelry has been taken over. Reporting to the Patriarch. Zhao's real estate has been taken over. One by one, the disciples of the Qin family came to report. In the blink of an eye, most of the properties of the Lin and Shao families were taken over. Hearing these voices, Qin Luo looked calm, but her heart was extremely excited and trembling slightly. These properties would be completely managed by the Qin family in the future, and 20% of the profits would belong to the Qin family. This was a huge profit. At this moment, Lin Tian stood up. It's time, Patriarch Qin. Let's go to the Shao family and settle this. Lin Tian now. He handed Qin Luo the last deed, the deed of the Shao family. Taking the deed, Qin Luo was even more excited. Let's go, Qin Luo said. Nephew Lin, you go first. Qin Luo didn't dare to be careless with Lin Tian, a second-stage array controller. Today, it's in the name of the Qin family. I'm just following you, so you go first. Lin Tian now. At this moment, he had put on the black robe again. The Shao family, Shao Nan sat in the main hall of the Shao family, frowning and tapping the table with his right hand. It had been a day since he asked Xiao Yun to find someone to kill Lin Tian. Last night, Xiao Yun didn't come back, and he couldn't get in touch with her, which made Xiao Nan a little worried. Vaguely, an ominous premonition arose spontaneously. Patriarch. Something bad happened. Something bad happened. An anxious voice sounded. Outside the main hall, a Shao family disciple staggered in. How dare you? What do you think you're doing? Xiao Nan was in a bad mood. Seeing the servant rushing into the main hall in such a panic, anger appeared on his face. Patriarch. Something bad happened, something bad happened. The Shao family disciple said in a trembling voice. Our Shao family's fishing industry was taken away by someone else. What? Xiao Nan's face changed, and then he scolded. Nonsense. Who can casually take away our Shao family's fishing industry? Do you think the people who supervise the fishing industry are idiots? Where did this rumor come from, casually spreading it to the main house? Don't you know how bad of an impact it will have? No, Patriarch, this is true. The receiver, the other party, has the fishing industry contract. The Shao family disciple said. Hearing this, Xiao Nan became even angrier. Fishing industry contract? Nonsense, the fishing industry contract is. At this moment, another person rushed in a panic. Patriarch. Something bad happened. Lin family's wood industry was taken over by someone else. Patriarch. Lin family's jade artifacts were taken over. Patriarch. Shao family's real estate was. Lin family's horse farm was taken over. Patriarch. What should we do? One by one, the Shao family disciples rushed in, bringing the same news as the first Shao family disciple. Someone took over the Shao family's industry with the fishing industry contract, which made Shao Nan tremble. Impossible! Shao Nan roared. Quickly walking out of the main hall, Shao Nan came to the old house. Patriarch. The two guards guarding the old house hurriedly saluted. Out of the way! Shao Nan shouted. He pushed the two guards aside, opened the 8 locks of the iron door, and then opened the wooden box in the deepest part. In an instant, Shao Nan was stunned. The Lin family's and Shao family's property contracts in the box were all gone. Damn it! What's going on? Rushing out of the old house, Shao Nan grabbed the collars of the two guards. How did you guard this place? Someone stole the most important thing of our Shao family, and you didn't even report it. Patriarch, everything was normal during this period. One of the guards said in a trembling voice. Shao Nan's aura at this moment made the two guards feel a wave of fear. Normal? If it's normal, why did my Shao family's property contracts disappear? Shao Nan roared. The two guards were so scared that their faces turned pale. The Shao family's property contracts were lost? Even they knew very well what this meant, and they immediately began to tremble. Get lost! Shao Nan threw the two guards away, gathered his men, and walked outside. The Shao family's industry was taken over by someone else, and the Lin family's industry was also taken over. Such a big matter, he had to come personally. Shao Nan led a group of people to the Shao family's courtyard. At this moment, the Shao family's front door was pushed open, and a burst of laughter sounded. Brother Shao, how have you been? Qin Luo walked in, followed by Lin Tian in a black robe. Behind them were 2 teams of capable guards, almost all of whom were in the first sky of body refining realm. The 2 guards at the front were even stronger, and in the 3rd sky of body refining realm. Under the black robe, Lin Tian narrowed his eyes and stared at Shao Nan, with a cold smile on his lips. Qin Luo, what are you doing here? That's what I mean. Shao Nan's face was cold. Qin Luo was not alone, but with a group of guards. Obviously, she was not here to visit. Nothing, I'm here to take back the last thing. Qin Luo smiled. This is my Shao family. There's nothing you want to take back. Shao Nan said coldly. Suddenly, he thought of the takeover of his industries, and his face suddenly changed. It's you? Haha, it's me. Qin Luo nodded, naturally understanding what Shao Nan was talking about. After speaking, Qin Luo reached out and took out a sheepskin scroll from her arms. You! Seeing this sheepskin scroll, Shao Nan and all the disciples of the Shao family behind him all changed their expressions. It was obviously the property deed of the Shao family, but when they looked down, the signature was not Shao Nan's, but Lin Shi's. With a faint smile, Qin Luo said, See, Master Shao? From now on, this mansion and everything in it no longer belong to the Shao family, but to the little princess of the Lin family, Lin Shi. I was entrusted by the master of the Lin family to take back this mansion. I hope Master Shao can cooperate with me. The Lin family, Lin Shi? How is that possible? Shao Nan's face was gloomy. Qin Luo, it's you who stole the property deed of the Shao family, and changed the ownership of the property deed in the name of the Lin family. How dare you? Master Shao, what are you talking about? Who doesn't know that the Shao family guards Fengjian City so tightly that even a fly can't fly in? How could I steal the property deed of the Shao family? Don't flatter me. It's written clearly in black and white on this property deed. Master Shao, you'd better cooperate. By the way, the Qin family has taken back the other properties of the Lin and Shao families. Master Shao, you don't have to worry. Qin Luo said. You! Staring at the property deed of the Shao family in Qin Luo's hand, Shao Nan's face was extremely gloomy. Qin Luo didn't care. She waved her hand and said to the 2 groups of people behind her, Come, take over the Shao family. Yes, master. The 2 groups of people responded and moved together. The 2 guard captains led their subordinates and rushed straight into the Shao family. Who dares to mess around in the Xiao family? A cold shout sounded. Xiao Nan suddenly exploded and hit a guard captain of the Qin family with his palm. The guard captain was sent flying and hit a huge rock not far away. He vomited blood and died on the spot. Such a scene made everyone's expression change. You! Qin Luo was shocked. The dead guard captain of the Qin family was at the 3rd level of the refinement realm, but he was killed by Xiao Nan with one blow. Xiao Nan, you actually. Xiao Nan snorted and released his aura, causing the other guards of the Qin family to tremble. 8th level of the refinement realm? A guard trembled. Qin Luo, you're good. You've got guts. If I don't make you pay today, you won't know how I made the Xiao family the #1 Shang family in Fengjian City. Xiao Nan said coldly. Xiao Nan moved and almost instantly appeared in front of Qin Luo. He pressed his hand down and grabbed at Qin Luo. Right at this moment, another hand shot out like a bolt of lightning and grabbed Xiao Nan's wrist. I didn't expect the master of the Xiao family, Xiao Nan, to be an adept at the 8th level of the refinement realm. You hit it well. Under the black robe, Lin Tianlin laughed. Chapter 65. Xiao Nan was startled, not only because the man in the black robe had grabbed his wrist, but also because he was very familiar with the voice coming from under the black robe. Who are you? Xiao Nan shouted. Me? Lin Tiantan smiled. Am I not the person you spent 600,000 spirit coins to kill? What? Xiao Nan's face changed dramatically, and he instantly guessed who the man in the black robe was. Without hesitation, Xiao Nan raised his left hand and slapped down at Lin Tian. Lin Tian snorted coldly and raised his leg to kick. Bang! Xiao Nan was kicked in the abdomen and flew out in a sorry state, landing on the ground with a bang. Master! The faces of the Xiao family's disciples and servants all changed. Some wanted to rush up, but the 2 teams of guards of the Qin family were not just for show. Their swords and spears flashed coldly and were aimed at everyone. Qin Luo stood behind Lin Tian, her heart palpitating. The captain of the guards of the Qin family at the 3rd firmament of the body refining realm was killed by Xiao Nan with one slap, but now Lin Tian had sent Xiao Nan flying with one kick. How powerful was he? Xiao Nan coughed and stood up, clutching his chest. You! Staring at Lin Tian, Xiao Nan's face was extremely gloomy. Under the black robe, Lin Tianling smiled. Do you want to ask why I'm still alive? Staring at Xiao Nan's ugly face, Lin Tiantan said indifferently. Because the people who came to kill me are all dead. Xiao Nan's face changed dramatically. All dead? Where's Yuner? Where's my daughter? In hell, Lin Tiantan said indifferently. You! Xiao Nan was shocked and angry. You killed her? She wanted to kill me, so I killed her. Isn't it fair? Lin Tiantan smiled. You beast! Xiao Nan was extremely angry. His chest heaved up and down violently, and his eyes were bloodshot. You two had been together for several years, and you actually killed her. Why are you so vicious? Feelings? Lin Tian laughed. For 2 years, you took advantage of my kindness to her and took away all the property of my Lin family. More than 2 months ago, you colluded with Emosin to throw me off the cliff. A few days ago, you bribed others to kill me. You still have the face to mention the word feelings in front of me? Aren't you a bit too thick-skinned? Hearing this, Xiao Nan's face instantly became incomparably livid. Xiao Nan's eyes were bloodshot. He clenched his fists tightly and roared at the sky. No matter what, I must kill you today and offer you as a sacrifice to Yuna's soul in heaven. He only had one daughter, and he usually doted on her. But now, she had died just like that. At this moment, he hated Lin Tian to the bone. Boom! A wild and domineering aura rushed out of Xiao Nan's body. Xiao Nan roared furiously as a layer of golden light surged out from his palms. It seemed as if lightning was interwoven together, as he fiercely slapped towards Lin Tian. Cotton candy such might instantly shocked everyone. This seems to be a middle-grade body refinement martial skill, How can this Xiaonan know such a martial skill? Could it be that he used to be a disciple of the Nine Sons martial house? The Qin clan guards were shocked. Lin Tian narrowed his eyes. He instantly recognized the palm technique that Xiaonan had used. It was indeed a middle-grade body refinement martial skill. He had seen it before in the martial scripture pavilion of the Nine Sons martial house. It was called the Golden Peak Palm. Cultivating this martial skill would make one's palms as hard as gold. Die, you bastard! Xiaonan roared. Lin Tian smiled. I don't understand. What right do you have to be angry? He took a step forward and directly swung his right fist. The fist and the palm collided. With a crack, Xiaonan trembled as the bones in his hand were shattered. Lin Tian raised his leg and kicked Xiaonan in the chest again, sending him flying again. During this period of time, he had not wasted his time in the wild waves formation. His body had already been tempered to an incomparably strong state. His pure physical strength was comparable to a 9th-level body refinement realm expert. Although Xiaonan had cultivated the Golden Peak Palm, he was definitely not a match for Lin Tian. The sound of people sucking in cold air could be heard all around. So strong! The Qin clan guards were shocked. Xiaonan, who was at the 8th level of body refinement realm, was actually forced back by a punch and a kick after using a middle-grade body refinement realm martial skill. How strong was Lin Tian's combat strength? On the other side, the faces of the Shao clan disciples were deathly pale. Ma! Patriarch! Someone trembled. The powerful patriarch of the Shao clan, who was usually so dignified, was actually so weak at this moment. Xiaonan fell to the ground. Blood gushed out of his mouth as he looked at Lin Tian in disbelief. How is this possible? You! How can you be so strong? Xiaonan was shocked and angry. He had cultivated for decades, but now, he could not compare to a 16-year-old youth. Xiaonan struggled to stand up. His face was filled with disbelief. Swoosh! In almost an instant, Lin Tian appeared in front of Xiaonan and slapped him. With a bang, Xiaonan was sent flying and landed in a corner of the courtyard. Patriarch! Some of the Shao clan disciples were anxious. However, with the Qin clan guards blocking their way, it was useless for them to be anxious. Lin Tian completely ignored everyone and indifferently walked towards Xiaonan. Before Xiaonan could stand up, he raised his leg and kicked, sending Xiaonan flying again and vomiting blood. Do you think the Lin clan's property is so easy to swallow? After this kick, Lin Tian's footsteps did not change. He once again pressed towards where Xiaonan landed. For the past 2 years, Lin Shi has been wronged by your Shao clan. Do you think I will forget? With a bang, Lin Tian raised his leg and kicked Xiaonan's head. This kick was too fierce. Even though Xiaonan's cultivation was at the 8th level of body refinement realm, he could not help but scream. Lin Tianyi stepped forward and arrived beside Xiaonan. He stepped on Xiaonan's chest. Ah! This kick directly broke one of Xiaonan's ribs. Slightly lowering his head, Lin Tian looked down at Xiaonan. 9 days ago, when you and that bitch Xiaoyun conspired to kill me, I just happened to be outside the door. After a pause, Lin Tian continued, It was also that night that I took back all the property deeds of the Lin and Shao clans. You never imagined this scene, right? It was you? You! Xiaonan's eyes widened as he stared at Lin Tian. His eyes were filled with shock. You must have the same suspicions as that bitch Xiaoyun. Your Shao family is heavily guarded, and I'm all alone. How could I sneak into your Shao family without anyone noticing and take away all the property deeds, right? Under the black robe, Lin Tian smiled cruelly. He lowered his voice and said, I'll tell you for free. I am a formation manipulator. The 3 martial fusion inscription scrolls you bought from the exchange pavilion last time were made by me. The one who bid against you and forced you to pay a high price was also me. Formation manipulators have many methods. It really isn't hard to inscribe some inscriptions and sneak into your Shao clan. You bang! Lin Tian swung his fist and punched Xiaonan's chest. Xiao Nan screamed and spat out another mouthful of blood. Do you know why I told you and that bitch Xiao Yun all this at the same time? It's very simple. To make you feel despair, to make you feel regret. Looking down at Xiao Nan, Lin Tianling smiled. Offending a second stage formation manipulator, isn't it very scary? This second stage. No, more accurately speaking, this third stage formation manipulator could have been on your side, but now you forced him to become your enemy. Do you regret it? Xiao Nan's eyes widened. You. Blood kept flowing out of his mouth. At this moment, Xiao Nan's face was filled with anger. But more than that, he felt regret and despair. Offending a formation manipulator was definitely a nightmare. Especially since this terrifying formation manipulator was originally going to be his Shao clan's son-in-law. But now, he had become his enemy. Xiao Nan trembled. Regret, despair, unwillingness. All kinds of emotions instantly filled his heart. Lin Tian stomped down with his foot and looked down at Xiao Nan as he said, From today onward, your Shao clan will cease to exist, and it will be completely removed from Supervisor Feng's city. All the disciples of the Shao clan will have to live on the streets. Are you unwilling to accept this? Unfortunately, it's useless even if you are unwilling. Narrowing his eyes, Lin Tian now said, Finally, let me hear your last words. Xiao Nan's body trembled. Fear appeared in his eyes. Let me go. Xiao Nan said in a trembling voice. Lin Tian's words carried an obvious killing intent. It made Xiao Nan feel cold all over. Let you go? Lin Tian sneered. You and that little B*TCH plotted to kill me. Now you're begging me to let you go. Do you think I'm that kind of naive idiot? No, don't. Xiao Nan was terrified. Lin Tian squatted down. A bright dagger suddenly appeared in his right hand. Goodbye. With a puff, the dagger directly stabbed into Xiao Nan's heart. Xiao Nan stared fixedly at Lin Tian. Finally, his neck slumped, and he breathed his last. With a cold snort, Lin Tian stood up. When the members of the Qin clan and Shao clan saw this scene, their faces turned pale. He's dead. Qin Luo swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The master of the Shao clan, an expert at the 8th level of the refinement realm, was killed so easily. Clan master. A Shao clan disciple trembled and said. Lin Tian tilted his head and glanced at the Shao clan disciples here. A silver light flashed in his left hand, and streaks of soul light quickly entered the bodies of all the Shao clan disciples. He lowered his voice and said coldly, I've left a mark in all of your bodies. When you go out, you'd better not mention me. Otherwise, you'll end up like Xiao Nan. Although Lin Tian had a grudge against the Shao clan, he was far from slaughtering the entire Shao clan. However, if what happened today really spread out, it would more or less affect him. Therefore, he could only use this method to threaten these people. He believed that these people of the Shao clan were not afraid of death. The Shao clan disciples trembled, their faces full of fear. No, someone said in horror. Lin Tian's face was indifferent. He stepped forward and came to Qin Luo. Nephew you. Qin Luo was very careful. Having seen Lin Tian's methods with his own eyes, Qin Luo was extremely afraid of Lin Tian. Xiao Nan ignored the black and white words on the property deed, and cruelly killed a guard captain of the Qin clan in a dispute. Then, a guard of the Qin clan accidentally killed Xiao Nan in self-defense. You know what to do, right? Yes. Qin Luo nodded quickly. From now on, all the properties of the Lin and Shao clans, including this mansion, will belong to the Qin clan. The Shao clan's current property and the future income of the Lin and Shao clans will be 20% for your Qin clan and 80% for me. Let's do it this way. Lin Tian said indifferently. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't play any tricks in the future or... Qin Luo felt a chill down his spine and shook his head repeatedly. I wouldn't dare. Absolutely not. Nephew, even if you gave me 10 times the courage, I would never dare to play any tricks behind your back. He didn't dare to offend a second-level array manipulator who could easily kill an expert at the 8th level of the refinement realm, unless he was stupid or crazy. That would be best. Lin Tian smiled and brushed past Qin Luo. He pushed open the gate of the Shao clan and walked out, leaving only a wicked voice floating into Qin Luo's ears. Happy cooperation. Chapter 66. In the afternoon, the sky was still bright, and the sun hadn't set yet. At this time, a voice spread through the entire Fengjian city. The Shao family is despicable and shameless. They had the help of the head of the Lin family, but they were ungrateful and took over the Lin family's property. I was once indebted to my old friend. Now that the Shao family has been destroyed, the Qin family will take over the Lin family's property. These properties will still belong to the Lin family, and the Qin family will only help to take care of them. Hearing this, the whole Fengjian city was shocked. What happened? The Shao family has been destroyed. How is that possible? That's the #1 business family in Fengjian city. How could it be destroyed so easily? Exactly. Who is spreading rumors in the name of the Qin family? How dare they? Everyone was surprised. In Fengjian city, almost no one believed this voice, but many people still came to the Shao family's mansion. Then they saw the Qin family's people going in and out of the Shao family's mansion, carrying many things back and forth. Why is the Qin family in the Shao family? Is it true? Has the Shao family really been destroyed? Many people were shocked. Huh! Isn't that the young master of the Shao family? Why does he look like he's lost his soul? He's also a disciple of the Shao family, but he's carrying a bag? Is he running away? Many people stared. Then, when someone saw Qin Luo walk into the Shao family's mansion, no one doubted it anymore. The Shao family had been destroyed unknowingly. The Shao family was destroyed just like that. It seems that the Qin family has been hiding very well these years. Yes, I think the Qin family has been under the Shao family all these years just for this day. I don't know how much they've prepared in secret. Didn't they say that they were indebted to the Lin family and helped them manage their property? Humph, how can you believe that? The Shao family used to say the same thing. They're just using the Lin family's name to prove themselves. Of course, it doesn't matter. Anyway, it has nothing to do with people like us. Many people were talking about it. On this day, in a short period of time, the news of the Shao clan's annihilation spread like wildfire, spreading to every corner of Fengjian city in the blink of an eye. All the forces were surprised. In the exchange treasure pavilion, Xian Yao and Pushi's eyes lit up. That little guy said that he had something to do, and then the Shao clan was destroyed in a few hours. Could it be? Xian Yao pondered and said, Elder Pu, what do you think is the possibility that he did it? Although the Shao clan is not worth mentioning, it is impossible for an ordinary person to destroy it in such a short period of time. At the very least, there will be rumors before it is destroyed. Pushi clasped his hands behind his back and said, However, if it's an array manipulator, then it's a different story. This kind of person has many tricks up his sleeve. Elder Pu, you mean the same thing as Xian Yao? Xian Yao said. Previously, you also said that that person seems to have a grudge with the Shao clan. I think it's him. Pu sure nodded his head. Other than this person, no one else in Fengji City can do this silently. It's impossible for a mere Qin clan to do this. This Qin clan is probably just that little brother's spokesperson on the surface. Interesting, I really like this little guy more and more. Xian Yao narrowed her eyes. Fengji City was in an uproar. At this moment, Lin Tian had already returned to his residence in the martial house. I have to cultivate quickly, Lin Tian muttered to himself. The destruction of the Shao clan made Lin Tian feel much better in his heart. However, he would not absurdly stop cultivating because of this. He went to the top pavilion and began to inscribe the spirit-gathering rune. Soon, he finished 3 spirit-gathering runes. He was now a 3rd-stage array manipulator, so inscribing spirit-gathering runes was naturally a piece of cake. After inscribing the spirit-gathering runes, Lin Tian did not cultivate immediately. Instead, he went down to the top pavilion to rest. On this day, he first fought with Zhang Feng and the others. Then, he ran to the Exchange Treasure Pavilion and the Shao clan. Even he was a little tired. There were still about 6 hours before midnight. He decided to rest until midnight before waking up to cultivate the level 4 scripture. At that time, the stars would be in the sky. It was the best time to cultivate the level 4 scripture. "Brother, the food is ready. Do you want to eat now?" After walking down from the top pavilion, Lin Shi's voice sounded. Lin Tian was originally going to rest, but after hearing Lin Shi's voice, he smiled and walked over. In the middle of the room, there was a small wooden table with chicken soup, vegetables, and rice. Steam was rising from the table. Lin Tian walked over and sat down. Ever since he earned his first sum of spirit coins by fusing martial runes, the siblings' lives had improved by a lot. In addition, Lin Shi's culinary skills were not bad. Thus, their daily meals were even more delicious. "Shao Shi, the Shao clan has closed down." Lin Tian smiled. For the past 2 years, Lin Shi had been oppressed by the Shao clan. She had also suffered a lot. He wanted to make Lin Shi happy. "Oh." Lin Shi nodded and carefully scooped a bowl of fresh soup for Lin Tian. "Oh?" Lin Tian stared at Lin Shi curiously. "Was it over with Justin, oh?" Lin Shi looked left and right and said, "Brother, what's wrong?" Lin Tianwei was stunned and hurriedly said, "Nothing, nothing." Looking at this well-behaved little girl, Lin Tian realized that Lin Shi had never cared about these things. This made him feel a little sad. He only knew how to take revenge for revenge. However, Lin Shi's mind was clean enough to forget these grudges. After a pause, he said softly, "By the way, Shao Shi, are you used to this place?" "And I'm used to it. As long as I'm with you, I'm used to going anywhere." Lin Shi nodded. Her little face was full of sweet smiles, but then she whispered, "That's right, that's right. Brother is usually so busy." Lin Tianwei was stunned and then felt a little guilty. Speaking of which, during this time, he really didn't spend much time with Lin Shi. Or rather, he didn't spend time with Lin Shi at all. As a brother, this was indeed a little dereliction of duty. After all, the brother and sister were now each other's only family. "I'm sorry, Shao Shi." Gently rubbing Lin Shi's little head, Lin Tian said softly, "When I'm not busy, I'll definitely take Shao Shi out to play, okay?" Right now, his cultivation was still low. It was not good for him to walk out of the martial house openly. The Mo family was eyeing him covetously. In addition, there was only a month left until his battle with Zhou Hao. During this month, he had to work hard to increase his cultivation. Therefore, in summary, it was indeed difficult for him to have time to accompany Lin Shi. At the very least, it was impossible for him to do so within this month. "Really?" Lin Shi was pleasantly surprised. "Really? Brother will lie to anyone but Shao Shi." Lin Tian smiled. Lin Shi was happy. After thinking, she said cutely, "It's not good to lie to others." Hearing this, Lin Tian smiled. After the meal, Lin Tian asked Lin Shi to rest. He cleaned up the dishes and went back to his room to catch up on sleep. Night soon covered the earth. Soon stars flashed in the sky. As time passed, the number of stars increased and the starlight became thicker. The whole world was covered in a layer of starlight. Lin Tian woke up and stretched his body. Then, he went to the top pavilion. Looking at the thick starlight in the sky, Lin Tian opened a spirit-gathering rune scroll. After taking a deep breath, he began to circulate the 4 extreme meridians. He used his true core force to guide the power of the stars and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth into his organs. The intense pain assaulted him just like in the past, but after experiencing this pain several times, Lin Tian was already very calm. Buzz! A faint silver light flashed. Gradually, the sound of thunder came out of his body. Lin Tian silently endured the pain of refining his body and circulated the 4 extreme meridians over and over again. He only stopped at dawn. Walking down from the top pavilion, he washed up and rested for 4 hours. Then, he returned to the top pavilion to cultivate again. During the day, when there were no stars, he only cultivated with the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Time passed quickly. Very soon, 3 days had passed. In these 3 days, other than resting and eating, Lin Tian spent the rest of his time cultivating the 4 extreme meridians in the top pavilion. It was very boring, but this was how cultivation was. If one wanted to become stronger, how could they be afraid of boredom? Boom! On this day, a vast aura emerged in the top pavilion. The silver light illuminated the dark top pavilion in an instant. Then, it quickly dimmed again. Lin Tian stood up and clenched his fist lightly. His bones cracked. I've finally reached the 8th level of the body refinement realm, Lin Tian muttered to himself. Half a month ago, he was already at the peak of the 7th level of the body refinement realm. Now, after 3 days of boring cultivation, it was normal for him to enter the 8th level of the body refinement realm. Of course, during this process, the spirit gathering rune played a key role. This rune allowed his cultivation speed to increase by at least 2 times. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't be able to reach the 8th level of the body refinement realm. Clenching his fist again, Lin Tian felt that his body was filled with energy. His heartbeat was stronger, and his breathing was smoother. He did a small experiment. When he was at the 7th level of the body refinement realm, he could hold his breath for 15 minutes. Now, after reaching the 8th level of the body refinement realm, he could hold his breath for a full hour. This meant that his inner breath was 2 times stronger. Inner breath was closely related to the internal organs. The stronger the inner breath, the stronger the internal organs, and the longer the battle. In other words, after reaching the 8th level of the body refinement realm, his current battle prowess was at least 2 times stronger than when he was at the 7th level of the body refinement realm. 8th level of the body refinement realm. Oh, I should go and choose a high-grade body refinement realm martial technique, Lin Tian muttered to himself. In fact, when he reached the 7th level of the body refinement realm, he could have gone to the martial pavilion to choose a high-grade body refinement realm martial technique. However, because of some matters, he was delayed. Standing up and tidying up his clothes, Lin Tian walked down from the top floor. Holding his identity jade token, he went to the disciple pavilion and updated his identity information under the guidance of the disciple pavilion's deacon. After that, he went to the martial pavilion. 8th level of the body refinement realm? After receiving Lin Tian's identity jade token and checking it with his true essence, the martial pavilion elder suddenly revealed a surprised expression. He sized Lin Tian up with some astonishment. The last time Lin Tian came here to choose a martial technique, he was only at the 5th level of the body refinement realm. Now, after 2 months, Lin Tian actually reached the 8th level of the body refinement realm. This cultivation speed shocked the martial pavilion elder. Good. As expected of a 9-star talent monster. The martial pavilion elder looked at Lin Tian with a face full of admiration. He returned the identity jade token and said, "Go to the 2nd floor. You can choose any high-grade body refinement realm martial technique. As for the time, I won't give you a time limit. Take your time." Chapter 67. In this world, martial arts reigned supreme. Many places spoke with strength, and the Nine-Yang martial house was no exception. Lin Tian's aptitude was astonishing, and his cultivation speed was monstrous. Naturally, he had a backdoor. This was normal. After a slight pause, Lin Tian quickly understood. He bowed and said, "Thank you, Elder." Generally speaking, martial house disciples had a time limit of 2 hours to choose a martial skill. Now that he did not have a time limit, he could naturally choose a martial skill more easily. This was a good thing for him. Immediately, Lin Tian walked towards the 2nd floor. This was Lin Tian's 2nd time coming to the 2nd floor of the martial scripture library. He was naturally familiar with this place. He walked straight to the upper-grade body refinement martial skills and looked through them seriously. Thousand Spirit Saber. Sky-splitting palm. Spirit nether sword. Remnant leg scroll. Immortal fist. Lin Tianyi flipped through the books and put them down. Among them, he saw many martial skills that he had seen before. For example, the Thousand Spirit Saber and the Spirit Nether Sword. However, they were not suitable for him. Very quickly, an hour had passed, and Lin Tian had seriously flipped through nearly 100 martial skills. Among these 100 martial skills, there were some martial skills that he felt were not bad, but he did not immediately make a decision. There was no time limit for him to choose a martial skill, so it was wise to look at them more and compare them with each other before making a decision. Light Dragon Claw. Yuan Bone Saber. Battle-shattering spear. After looking through the books for a quarter of an hour, Lin Tian still shook his head. After looking through set after set of martial skills, just as Lin Tian was about to make a decision, his eyes suddenly fell on the corner of the martial skill shelf. He saw a set of martial skills called the Azure Thunder Sword Art. Lin Tian was a little curious as to why this set of martial techniques that looked pretty good had been left to the side. He reached out his hand and flipped through it. After looking through it, Lin Tian was shocked. The Azure Thunder Sword Art's sword was like rushing thunder. When the sword was drawn, the sword whistled like thunder. Every move was comparable to a middle-grade body refinement martial skill. The difficulty of cultivating this sword technique was extremely high. Before cultivating it, one had to endure the lightning attacks of the thunder flame boar to cleanse their martial body, allowing their body to have a certain level of familiarity and understanding with the power of lightning. Looking at the requirements to cultivate this sword technique, even Lin Tian could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. No wonder he was ignored. Lin Tian shook his head. Not to mention the difficulty of cultivating the Azure Thunder Sword technique in the later stages. Just the fact that one had to endure the lightning attacks of the Flame Thunder Boar to cleanse one's martial body was enough to make 100% of people give up on this martial skill. One had to know that the Flame Thunder Pig was a Class 4 demonic beast. Although it was only a Class 4 elementary demonic beast, it was still an existence comparable to the Divine Vein realm. In order to practice this set of martial skills, he had to endure the thunderous attack of the Thunder Flame Pig with his body refinement stage cultivation. Wasn't that just courting death? Moreover, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that demonic beasts like the Flame Thunder Pig were extremely rare and almost impossible to find. Which expert created this sword technique? Lin Tian stared with wide eyes. As his gaze moved down, he saw a note in the corner and subconsciously read it out. This sword technique is missing 70%. I hope that the successor will choose seriously. Lin Tian was completely speechless. Putting down the Azure Thunder Sword technique, he walked to the other side. However, after taking a few steps, he could not help but stop. His gaze fell on the Azure Thunder Sword technique. The difficulty of cultivating this martial skill was indeed shocking, and the percentage of it being missing was also very high. However, there was no need to talk about its power. Every move was comparable to a middle-rank body refinement stage martial skill. This was truly very tempting. After staring at this martial skill for a few dozen breaths, Lin Tian finally clenched his teeth and grabbed it. I'm currently in the 8th rank body refinement stage, and can barely endure the attack of a Class 4 demonic beast. After that, I'll use the Gale Mark to hide and escape. As for the missing 70%, it doesn't matter if I can't find it. Just the first 30% is already strong enough. Its power might even be comparable to a low-rank Divine Vein realm martial skill, Lin Tian thought inwardly. As for the Flame Thunder Pig, although this type of demonic beast was very rare, he coincidentally saw it on the other side of the canyon when he was carrying out the Ghost Flower mission in the dark forest. After making up his mind, Lin Tian no longer hesitated and walked towards the first floor. Elder, this is the martial skill I chose. Lin Tian handed the Thunderclap sword technique over. After a martial house disciple finished choosing a martial skill or cultivation method, they had to show it to the Martial Pavilion Elder and register it. The Martial Pavilion Elder nodded and took a look. Immediately, he revealed a strange expression. Azure Thunder Sword Technique? Sizing up Lin Tian, the martial pavilion elder's expression was strange. Young man, this old man knows that your talent is extraordinary and can be called monstrous. However, this old man still does not recommend you to choose this Azure Thunder Sword Technique. Firstly, the first step of cultivating this sword technique is life-threatening. Secondly, the difficulty of cultivating this sword technique is extremely high. Most importantly, the rate of it being incomplete is too high. The martial pavilion elder shook his head and sighed. Although once a martial skill is chosen, it cannot be changed, the rules are fixed. How about this? You can choose another martial skill. Geniuses would receive preferential treatment no matter where they went. Lin Tian was a 9-star talent, and his cultivation speed was terrifyingly fast. This elder cherished talent and didn't want Lin Tian to suffer a great loss because of a momentary mistake. Lin Tian was grateful in his heart. He bowed and said, "Thank you, Senior, for your kindness. However, this junior has already carefully considered and will choose this martial skill." The martial pavilion elder was somewhat helpless. He looked at Lin Tian and asked, "The thunderclap sword technique from last time, to what extent have you cultivated it?" "Thanks to Senior, I have already cultivated it to the grand completion stage," Lin Tian said humbly. "Grand completion?" A trace of surprise flashed through the martial pavilion elder's eyes. "Show it to me." "Yes." Lin Tian nodded. His body shook, and a swift and fierce sword intent suddenly came out of his body. The martial pavilion elder narrowed his eyes. "Not bad, it is indeed the grand completion stage of the thunderclap sword technique." Lin Tian withdrew the thunderclap sword intent and quietly stood to the side. To be able to cultivate the thunderclap sword technique to the grand completion stage in such a short time, to be honest, even if you are a 9-star talent genius, this cultivation speed is truly beyond this old man's expectations. To be able to have such a shocking comprehension ability, this Azure Thunder Sword technique, perhaps you can really cultivate it. The martial pavilion elder finished the registration and handed the Azure Thunder Sword technique manual and the jade token to Lin Tian. He said, "The Azure Thunder Sword technique was created by a strange genius hundreds of years ago. The complete sword technique is said to be a sea of consciousness realm martial skill, but because it is too incomplete, it was finally evaluated as a superior body refinement martial skill. Even so, because the cultivation difficulty is too high, almost no one chooses it. This is at least 10 times more difficult than the thunderclap sword technique." Lin Tianyi was shocked. Sea of Consciousness Realm martial skill? Sea of Consciousness Realm. If I can collect it all, then that would be great. He muttered. At such a close distance, the martial pavilion elder could clearly hear his voice. He could not help but laugh and scold. "Stinky brat, don't be delusional. If you want to collect this set of martial skill, the success rate is less than 10%. Stop dreaming." After a pause, the martial pavilion elder changed the topic. "But then again, who can say for sure what is going to happen in this world? Perhaps one day, this incomplete set of martial skill will really be collected by you. Thank you, Senior, for your auspicious words." Lin Tian flattered. "All right." The martial pavilion elder waved his hand and smiled faintly. "Go cultivate." "Yes, Junior will take his leave." Lin Tian bowed and said. After this, he left the martial pavilion and headed back to his residence. When he returned to his residence, the sky was already dark. Lin Tian thought for a moment and decided to leave for the dark forest tomorrow. He threw the things he needed into the stone ring and then once again cultivated in the pavilion. Having just reached the 8th level of body refinement, it was naturally necessary to consolidate his cultivation. Just like this, the night quickly passed. In the wee hours of the morning, Lin Tian faced the morning sun and breathed. After washing up, he went to Lin Shi's door. Seeing that the little girl was still sleeping, he did not disturb her. He only left a small note to tell Lin Shi where he was going and then left. In the early morning, there were very few disciples in the martial house. After all, there were very few people as diligent as Lin Tian. Wrapped in a black robe, Lin Tian walked out of the Nine Sun Martial House and went to the Array Controller Guild to pick up a few missions before heading to the Dark Forest. He wanted to cultivate the Thunderclap sword art. The first step was to find the Thunderclap pig. When he arrived at the Dark Forest, it was almost noon. There were already many people standing outside the forest. Lin Tian took off his black robe in a deserted corner and put it into the stone ring. Only then did he walk into the Dark Forest. With everything in the stone ring, his entire body was light and agile. It was much more comfortable than the last time he came. Although this little thing cost 700,000 spirit coins, it was indeed worth it. Lin Tian looked at the stone ring on his middle finger and thought to himself. Outside the Dark Forest, there were many people clamoring to form a team. However, Lin Tian preferred to travel alone, so he did not care. It was his second time entering the Dark Forest. The space in the old forest was very old and the demonic aura was very dense. Following the path from before, Lin Tian quickly arrived at the canyon not long ago and walked in front of the stone wall. He took a deep breath and used the duality steps. In the blink of an eye, he climbed up the stone wall that was dozens of feet high. Then, he lightly jumped and landed on the other side of the stone wall. Boom! The moment he landed, a huge demonic beast jumped from the side and brought along a hurricane. It was a flame-tailed scorpion. Its entire body was surrounded by a foul black fog. This flame-tailed scorpion was sinister by nature. However, it was only an early-stage level 3 demonic beast, comparable to a 7th firmament body refinement cultivator. In front of the current Lin Tian, it was naturally very weak and posed no threat. Suddenly, a long sword appeared in Lin Tian's hand and he slashed down without hesitation. Pooh! Blood splattered. The flame-tailed scorpion fell to the ground with a bang. It twitched a few times and then stopped moving. Raising the long sword again, Lin Tian dug out the flame-tailed scorpion's beast core and continued to walk forward. Soon, he walked about 500 feet away from the stone wall. Oh, I remember that at that time, the flame-tailed thunder pig jumped out from a bush 1,000 feet away. Lin Tian thought to himself. Without any hesitation, Lin Tian headed in that direction. Because the weakest beasts in this area were rank 3 demonic beasts, he was extremely cautious. After all, he would have to face a rank 4 demonic beast, and he would have to take a lightning strike from it. As such, he had to conserve enough energy. Chapter 68. Regs, 10,000 feet passed in a blink of an eye. Lin Tian approached the bushes where he encountered the thunderbolt boar and approached cautiously. About 10 breaths later, he entered the depths of the bushes but did not find any trace of the thunderbolt boar. Did it go hunting? Lin Tian was puzzled. Activating the Heavenly One Soul spell, his perception suddenly became stronger, and he captured the demonic aura in the air. The thunderbolt boar could spit fire and release lightning, so its demonic aura was naturally special. Moreover, the other party was a 4th-grade demonic beast, so its demonic aura was dense. There would be some demonic aura in the air, and Lin Tian captured it in a moment. Southeast direction. Looking up, Lin Tian was slightly relieved. When he came for the Ghost Flower mission, he had obtained information about the Dark Forest from the Array Manipulator Guild. At this moment, the area was mostly filled with 2nd-grade demonic beasts, so it was not too dangerous. Without hesitation, Lin Tian immediately headed towards the southeast. He maintained a balanced speed, neither fast nor slow, and his breathing rate was always the same. Not long after, he crossed more than 10,000 feet, and a violent true yuan fluctuation came from the front. Because the direction was the same, Lin Tian did not avoid and continued forward. After another 10 breaths, Lin Tian stopped. In front of him, several youths were fighting with a middle-grade 3rd-grade demonic beast. Lin Tian had seen one of them before. It was Lu Xing, who was with Zhou Hao. Roar! With a scream, the middle-grade 3rd-grade demonic beast fell into a pool of blood. At this moment, Lu Xing also noticed Lin Tian. He revealed a surprised expression and said in a low voice, "It's you? You're still alive!" When he saw Lin Tian being dragged away by the centipede, he thought that Lin Tian was dead. However, not long after, the news that Lin Tian had stayed in the wild wave array for 12 hours spread. Only then did Lu Xing know that Lin Tian was still alive. Lin Tian narrowed his eyes and glanced at Lu Xing. Lu Xing was shocked. Recalling Su Ho's encounter, he revealed a trace of fear. "What do you want? What are you afraid of? I won't do anything to you," Lin Tian said with disdain. Lin Tian glanced at Lv Xing and left. As for why Lu Xing was here, he wasn't surprised at all. Lu Xing was just an ordinary disciple of the martial house. He should have received some spirit coin-earning missions from the Array Manipulator Guild or the Treasure Exchange Pavilion before coming to the Dark Forest. Although the Greenwind Ridge was also a paradise for demonic beasts, it couldn't be compared to the Dark Forest. After all, the Greenwind Ridge was a training ground for the disciples of the martial house. The species of demonic beasts here couldn't be compared to the Dark Forest. Furthermore, the Greenwind Ridge didn't have as many rare herbs as the Dark Forest. In a flash, Lin Tian disappeared from Lv Xing's sight. "Brother Lu, who was that person?" a young man beside Lv Xing asked. "Lin Tian." Lv Xing's face darkened. The few youths were a little surprised. "That's the number 1 freshman, the second in the outer house, Lin Tian?" "Yes." "This? I heard that the brat killed Emosen from the Emo clan. The Emo clan is doing everything they can to get rid of him. At this time, this brat actually dares to step out of the Nine-Yang martial house. He has quite the guts," someone said. The Nine-Yang martial house was a natural barrier. Being in the Nine-Yang martial house, even if the Mo clan was a powerful martial clan, they wouldn't dare to directly rush into the martial house and do anything to Lin Tian. Lv Xing raised his head and looked in the direction Lin Tian left. A sinister light flashed in his eyes. "Go! Go back!" Lv Xing said coldly. "Go back?" Someone revealed a puzzled expression. "But Brother Lu, we haven't finished our mission. This mission is nothing. Maybe we can get 10 times more spirit coins than this mission," Lv Xing sneered. After passing by Lv Xing, Lin Tian's speed didn't change. However, the Heavenly One Soul technique circulated a little faster. His powerful soul perception covered the surroundings and chased after the Flame Thunder Pig's aura. Boom! A strange bird descended from the sky. Its eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, and its sharp claws were aimed at Lin Tian. This was a rank 3 demonic beast named Giant Flying Bird. It was comparable to an 8th-level body refinement realm cultivator. Lin Tian tilted his head, grabbed the giant flying bird's claw, and threw it back. Bang! The giant flying bird's 1,000-pound demonic body fell heavily, crushing countless old trees. Not caring about the life or death of this demonic beast, Lin Tian continued forward. After about half an hour, there was a burning sensation in front of him, and there were screams echoing. As far as the eye could see, a demonic beast that was about 20 feet tall was surrounded by a group of strong men in armor. This demonic beast was covered in red hair, and each strand of hair stood upright, giving people a feeling that it was very sharp. Most importantly, this demonic beast's body was surrounded by flames and lightning. It was so fierce that it made people feel numb. Ah! In an instant, screams sounded again. Someone died in the mouth of this demonic beast. Lin Tian jumped onto the branch of a huge tree, and his eyes revealed joy. Flame Thunder Pig, I finally found it! Lin Tian muttered to himself. In front of him, dozens of strong men were not weak. However, compared to the Flame Thunder Pig, they were too weak. Lin Tian didn't care about this. He jumped several times and finally got close to the battlefield. Clang! A long sword appeared in his hand, and he slashed out a shocking wind sword aura that landed on the Flame Thunder Pig. The Flame Thunder Pig was in pain, and it let out a furious roar. It turned around and stared at Lin Tian with its blood-red demonic eyes. Stupid pig, come and bite me! Lin Tian shouted. How could the Flame Thunder Pig, which was comparable to a divine vein realm existence, tolerate such provocation? With a furious roar, it immediately abandoned the dozens of strong men and charged toward Lin Tian, smashing old trees along the way. Lin Tian was shocked. This flame thunder pig was indeed terrifying. Lin Tianyi tapped the old tree with the tip of his foot, and he jumped up and flashed into the distance. "Stupid pig, come quickly!" he called out. The flame thunder pig, a class 4 demonic beast, clearly had its own consciousness. After hearing Lin Tian's words, it immediately let out another furious roar. It opened its mouth and spat out a ball of raging flames, causing the air to distort. Lin Tian used the duality steps and sprinted forward quickly. There were too many people here. He had to go to a place with fewer people and fewer demonic beasts, and then endure another thunderous attack from the flame thunder pig. Swish! 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 Using the duality steps, Lin Tian quickly rushed out 200 feet. As a class 4 demonic beast, the flame thunder pig's speed was naturally not slow. It chased closely behind Lin Tian. Not far away, dozens of strong men were fighting with the flame thunder pig. A group of strong men let out a breath of relief. "Young master, are you all right?" At the back of the battlefield stood an old servant and a young man in luxurious clothes. The old servant asked cautiously, "I'm fine." The young man in luxurious clothes shook his head, and his eyes lit up. He looked at the direction where Lin Tian ran and waved his hand. He shouted, "Hey! Brother, you are too domineering." "Thanks." The young man in luxurious clothes' voice was very loud, and the distance between the two wasn't far. Lin Tian naturally heard it. He turned around and glanced at the young man. He didn't say anything and just increased his speed. Boom! The flame thunder pig ran over ferociously. Its valiant demonic body smashed old trees one after another, raising a cloud of dust. A class 4 demonic beast is really scary. Lin Tian thought to himself. If he hadn't reached the second stage of the duality steps, he wouldn't have dared to provoke such an existence. As he ran forward, Lin Tianyi looked around carefully. After about an hour, an empty grassland finally appeared in front of him. There weren't any other powerful demonic beasts around. Lin Tian immediately flashed over. With a swish, he stopped and landed on the grassland. Turning around and looking at the approaching flame thunder pig, Lin Tian's expression turned extremely serious. This was a class 4 demonic beast. If he wasn't careful, he might die. The flame thunder pig roared and finally got close. Its demonic eyes stared at Lin Tian fiercely. "Damn pig, release electricity!" Lin Tian shouted. The flame thunder pig roared and dug its hooves into the ground, charging at Lin Tian fiercely. Lin Tian was speechless. He used the duality steps and leaped into the air to the other side. Boom! A demonic fire sprayed over, scaring Lin Tian so much that he hurriedly stepped in the air and dodged the fire. Even so, he still felt pain all over his body. The skin on his chest felt like it was about to melt. Too scary. Lin Tian's heart palpitated. If he was swept by the fire just now, he believed that he would have lost his combat ability in an instant. If that's the case, I can only take one hit from this damn pig, Lin Tian thought to himself. Using the duality steps, Lin Tian circled around the flame thunder pig on the empty grassland. He didn't dare to make any other movements. He completely relied on the speed of the duality steps to dodge the flame thunder pig's normal attacks. Damn pig! How dare you release electricity? Release electricity, you stupid pig! Stupid! You're really a pig! Lin Tian's curses kept ringing. At this moment, if someone saw this scene, they would be so shocked that their eyeballs would pop out. A cultivator in the body refinement stage actually dared to provoke a class 4 demonic beast, the flame thunder pig. Damn pig, if you don't release electricity, I won't play with you anymore! Lin Tian scolded again. Using the duality steps consumed physical strength and true essence. If this continued, it would be very disadvantageous for him. Using the duality steps, Lin Tian kept cursing. After another 15 minutes, the flame thunder pig was finally completely enraged. Following a furious roar, the flames outside the flame thunder pig's body weakened a little. Then, the surging power of thunder and lightning gathered, making crackling sounds. "It's coming!" Seeing this scene, Lin Tian's heart palpitated, but he was also happy. "Roar!" With another furious roar, the flame thunder pig's demonic eyes turned red. A lightning ball about 3 feet in diameter appeared in its mouth. Electric arcs intertwined and shot fiercely at Lin Tian. Wherever this lightning ball passed, the air became distorted and the ground became pitch black, as if it was scorched by the lightning. A terrifying wave instantly spread out. Lin Tian's heart palpitated. Was this the power of thunder and lightning? It was too terrifying. It was even more terrifying than the flames that the flame thunder pig spat out before. Looking at this lightning ball, Lin Tian suddenly felt a little apprehensive. With his current strength, could he really withstand such a terrifying lightning attack? "We've already reached this step. Go!" Lin Tian gritted his teeth. A glint flashed in his eyes. Lin Tian did not dodge and rushed towards the lightning ball. Chapter 69. The terrifying lightning ball rolled over, crackling with lightning. Silver electric arcs could be seen around it. It was extremely terrifying. Facing this lightning ball, Lin Tian gritted his teeth and removed all his defenses. He faced it with his physical body. Cough! The moment the two collided, Lin Tian spat out a mouthful of blood. His clothes were torn apart. The lightning ball wrapped around him and rolled for nearly 10 feet. With a bang, Lin Tian fell to the ground. His clothes were torn, and his body was covered in blood. His hair was burnt, and blood kept flowing out of his mouth. "It hurts." Muttering in his heart, Lin Tian felt that it was difficult to breathe. At this moment, he felt that his internal organs were torn apart, and his vision became blurry. In his blurry vision, the flame thunder boar was running over, surrounded by electric arcs. Lin Tian gritted his teeth and desperately rolled to the side. At the same time, he used his last bit of strength. The Gale rune floated out of the stone ring and appeared in his right hand. With a thought, the Gale rune was activated, and his body suddenly became transparent. The flame thunder boar rushed over, and its demonic body suddenly stopped. In his vision, Lin Tian's figure disappeared. Looking around, the flame thunder boar's blood-red demonic eyes became extremely ferocious. With a loud roar, it rushed into the distance. Rumble! The ground shook, and old trees collapsed. The flame thunder boar's figure and aura disappeared into the distance. In a corner not far from where he was, Lin Tian was lying on the ground, panting. Every time he panted, fresh blood would flow out from the corner of his mouth. He looked as miserable as he could. "I almost died," Lin Tian thought. At this moment, he was extremely weak. He didn't even have the strength to stand up. He could only lie on the ground. After about 15 minutes, he used the second Gale rune. At this moment, his injuries were too severe. He couldn't even stand up and walk. At most, he could only move his hands. With a thought, the 4 extremities scriptures slowly circulated, and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth floated over. Arg! The intense pain caused him to let out a low groan. The lightning energy of the flame thunder boar flowed through his body. The moment he started to circulate the 4 extremities meridian, the lightning energy instantly turned berserk. It was like a torrent, wantonly attacking his internal organs and flesh. Lin Tian stopped circulating the 4 extreme meridians and gasped for breath. A moment later, the general outline of the Azure Thunder Sword art appeared in his mind. "I almost died. I hope you don't disappoint me," Lin Tian muttered to himself. Revolving the true essence of the Azure Thunder Sword skill, Lin Tian suddenly felt the power of thunder within his body become docile. As he revolved his true essence according to the general principles of the Azure Thunder Sword skill, the power of thunder actually began to gradually dissipate, turning into streaks of silver lightning that quickly fused into his true essence. At this moment, the numbness in his body began to gradually disappear. Lin Tian was shocked. The lightning energy of the flame thunder boar seemed to have become something like a drug. When the Azure Thunder Sword skill was activated, the power of thunder fused into his true essence. Suddenly, there was a burst of thunder in his body. Gradually, even the surface of his body was flashing with electric arcs. His body was still weak, but at this moment, Lin Tian actually felt a majestic power gathering in his body. It was as if a terrifying thunder beast was about to awaken in his body. What a good Azure Thunder Sword skill! Lin Tian's eyes flashed. It was only the first time he circulated the general principles, but it was already so powerful. It was enough to show how terrifying this sword skill was. Time passed by minute. Lin Tian lay on the ground and circulated the general principles of the Azure Thunder Sword skill until all the gale marks on his body were exhausted. He finally regained his ability to move and stood up from the ground. Luckily that damn pig didn't come back. Otherwise I would be dead. Lin Tian wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. His clothes were tattered, but there was a new set of clothes in the stone ring that he had prepared beforehand. He quickly changed out of them. At this time, he was wearing a white robe and looked somewhat handsome. Unfortunately, the combination of his white robes and his slightly charred hair made him look out of place. Lin Tian naturally didn't care about this. He didn't dare to stay and hurriedly left. After about a quarter of an hour, he found a relatively secluded place. This place was not far from the edge of the dark forest and was surrounded by low-level demonic beasts. Sitting under a huge rock, Lin Tian took out a pill from the stone ring and threw it into his mouth. He then circulated the 4 extremes scripture. This pill was called True Essence Pill. He bought it at the Bao Pavilion and could help warriors recover their true essence faster. 1. A faint silver light circulated, and the spirit chi from all directions quickly gathered. After an hour, Lin Tian stood up. His true essence had recovered by about 80%. Huff! Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Lin Tian felt a lot more comfortable. Looking around, the origin returning sword suddenly appeared in his hand and he began to practice the Azure Thunder Sword technique. The Azure Thunder Sword technique didn't have fixed sword moves like the shocking wind sword art. It only had the comprehension and cultivation of the Thunder Sword intent. As long as this sword technique crossed the threshold, the power of any sword move would be comparable to a mid-level body refining martial technique. In Lin Tian's body, his true essence revolved according to the Azure Thunder Sword technique. At the same time, sword shadows appeared in his mind. Standing in this space, Lin Tian's body moved with the sword, and the long sword in his hand slashed out again and again. Clang! After an unknown period of time, with a clang, electric arcs appeared on the surface of the origin returning sword. Since the electric arcs appeared, he was not far from crossing the threshold of the Azure Thunder Sword technique. Again! Lin Tian whispered. At this place, Lin Tian swung his sword again and again until his forehead was dripping with sweat. This repeated for another half an hour. Finally, the origin returning sword was shrouded in lightning. When the sword was swung out, the sword roared like thunder. The Azure Thunder Sword technique, the sword is like thunder. It is indeed extraordinary, Lin Tian thought. At this moment, he had comprehended 1/10 of the Azure Thunder Sword technique, and had crossed the threshold of the Azure Thunder Sword technique. Wiping the sweat off his forehead, Lin Tian swallowed a true essence pill and once again revolved the 4 extremes scripture, quickly recovering his consumed true essence. This true essence pill was only an ordinary pill. It cost about 10 spirit coins each and wasn't too precious. At least for the current Lin Tian, 10 spirit coins were nothing. After 15 minutes, Lin Tian opened his eyes and stood up. The true essence in his body had recovered by about 70%. Glancing around, Lin Tian felt that it was time to go back. The Azure Thunder Sword technique can be cultivated in the Green Wind Ridge after returning to the martial house. It is much safer there, Lin Tian said to himself. Without hesitation, Lin Tian walked out of the dark forest. Soon, he was less than 300 feet away from the edge of the dark forest. He could vaguely see many pedestrians at the edge of the forest. Whoosh! Right at this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out as a long arrow whistled through the air. Lin Tianyi was startled and quickly dodged to the side. "Who is it? Come out!" Standing on the trunk of an old tree, he coldly shouted. "Your movements are quite agile," a cold voice sounded. In front of him, a figure walked out from behind dozens of old trees with obvious killing intent. "Who are you?" Lin Tianling said. Looking at the dozens of people, Lin Tian's heart sank. These people were very strong. "You dare to ask who we are after killing the young master of the Mo clan?" The leader coldly sneered. This was a middle-aged man in green. The aura on his body was extremely terrifying. He was at the peak of the 9th firmament of the refinement realm. "The Mo clan!" Lin Tian's eyes turned cold. Looking at the dozens of people cautiously, Lin Tian was a little confused. When he walked out of the martial house, he was very careful and wrapped himself in a black robe. It was reasonable to say that the Mo clan would not know that he was in the dark forest. Suddenly, Lin Tian's heart moved as he thought of a person. LV Xing! Lin Tian's eyes turned cold. In the dark forest, LV Xing had seen him once. After that, the Mo clan came. As a normal person, Lin Tian instantly guessed that this matter was related to LV Xing. He had to admit that he guessed correctly. Not long ago, when LV Xing saw him, he immediately remembered that the Mo clan was scheming to deal with Lin Tian. He immediately gave up the mission and rushed back to Fengjian City. He told the Mo clan about Lin Tian's whereabouts and received a large sum of spirit coins. The azure-clothed middle-aged man had a cold expression as he stared at Lin Tian and said, "My Mo clan has always placed spies outside the Nine-Yang martial house. I don't understand how you managed to avoid the surveillance of these spies and come to this dark forest. You want to know? Sure, take my sword, and I will tell you," Lin Tiantan said indifferently. The middle-aged man in green coldly stared. "Take him down!" A cold voice sounded. Behind the middle-aged man in green, dozens of figures rushed toward Lin Tian. These people were born in martial arts clans and were around 40 years old. Their cultivation was extremely strong, and the weakest was at the 8th level of body refinement. In the blink of an eye, someone rushed forward and stabbed with a simple but ruthless knife. "Humph!" Lin Tianling smiled. He leaped back lightly and slashed with the shocking wind sword art. Clang! The sword whistled and the person who rushed forward was instantly pierced through the abdomen by a silver sword aura. He fell down with a bang and let out a painful groan, but he didn't die. The middle-aged man in green's face darkened. "Don't be careless. Attack together!" In order to deal with Lin Tian, the Mo clan had collected a lot of information about Lin Tian. Obviously, the middle-aged man in green had read the information before coming here and had some understanding of Lin Tian. The dozens of people nodded and changed their footwork slightly, no longer advancing rashly. Boom! The dozens of people all mastered martial arts. Under the instructions of the middle-aged man in green, they gathered together and seemed to form a killing force. They rushed toward Lin Tian's Sha with a similar rhythm. Lin Tian's heart skipped a beat, and his face became serious. These dozens of people were not weak, and their combined strength was even more terrifying, making him feel threatened. Whoosh! He stomped on the tree trunk and quickly retreated. His cultivation was not low, and his combat strength was not weak either. However, there was a saying that many ants could bite an elephant to death. No matter how strong he was, facing dozens of cultivators at the same level at the same time was still a bit unbearable. Moreover, these people were far from ordinary cultivators at the 8th level of body refinement. After cultivating for so many years, each of them had a very condensed aura. Chapter 70. Dozens of powerful auras pressed down at the same time. It was extremely terrifying. So many good novels, Lin Tian retreated and stared in one direction. He had no confidence in facing dozens of people at the same time. "The exits of the dark forest have been sealed by my Mo family's experts. You can't escape," the middle-aged man in green said coldly. Lin Tian paused and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He quickly changed his direction. His face darkened and his body gradually emitted killing intent. With so many people together, it will be troublesome even if I'm stronger. I have to separate them, Lin Tian thought to himself. He did not doubt the middle-aged man's words. With the exit sealed, Lin Tian rushed into the depths of the dark forest. Chase! The middle-aged man in green shouted. Lin Tian practiced the yin-yang steps, and his speed was fast. However, the dozens of people from the Mo family also practiced a similar movement technique. Although they could not compare to the yin-yang steps, after decades of practice, their speed was not much slower than Lin Tian's. Lin Tian glanced behind him and used the Tianyi soul art to sense his surroundings. After a while, he smirked and shot to the left. No matter what tricks you play, the outcome will not change. Chase after him, the middle-aged man in green said coldly. The dozens of people looked indifferent like killing machines. As Lin Tianyi changed directions, their swords and weapons clashed. Soon, the dozens of people chased after Lin Tian through a large area of old trees. At this moment, Lin Tian suddenly slashed forward with his sword. Then, he turned around and pressed down on the dozens of people. Here's a small gift for you. Lin Tian smiled evilly. The middle-aged man in green frowned. Suddenly, an angry roar sounded. Not far away, where Lin Tian slashed with his sword Qi, the old trees collapsed and a giant monster appeared. It was almost 4 feet tall, and its monster body was frighteningly large. Peak Class 3 monster, Iron Earth Bull! The middle-aged man in green's expression changed. The Iron Earth Bull was violent by nature. After being slashed by Lin Tianyi's sword, it was instantly enraged and rushed over. Facing a Peak Class 3 monster, the dozens of people from the Mo family were shocked. A 3rd-level peak monstrous beast was in existence comparable to the 9th level of the body refinement realm. Roar! The Iron Earth Bull let out a roar, which caused numerous hurricanes to swirl around it. Lin Tianling smiled. Using the yin-yang steps, he stomped hard to avoid the Iron Earth Bull. In the next moment, the dozens of people from the Mo clan were all exposed to the Iron Earth Bull. With another roar, the Iron Earth Bull didn't care who had unleashed the sword Qi and charged towards the Mo clan. Attack! Someone shouted. In the blink of an eye, a large amount of sword and saber light rushed forward. Bastard! Don't act recklessly! The azure-clothed middle-aged man reprimanded. There are almost all the books you want to read. It's much more stable than the average website, and the updates are faster. It's all text and no advertisements. Iron Earth Cowhide's skin was thick and tough. Ordinary swords and sabers would not be able to harm it. After being attacked by the Mo clan, it became even more furious and rushed over even more crazily. To the Mo family, this was a disaster. In the blink of an eye, someone let out a miserable shriek as half of his body was crushed by the Iron Earth Bull's foot. Then, after a few dozen breaths, the dozens of people from the Mo clan were scattered and could not regroup. At this moment, not far away, Lin Tianling smiled. Since the team was scattered, it would not be easy to regroup in a short time. Staring in a certain direction, Lin Tian's figure flickered, and he instantly flashed over. There were 7 people from the Mo clan here. Clang! Without any hesitation, he drew the Sword of Origin Restoration. The ear-piercing sound of the sword immediately rang out. It's you! How dare you! You actually dare to take the initiative to attack. Suppress him. The 7 people from the Mo clan had cold expressions. The 5 of them were not weak. They were all in the 8th realm of the body refinement realm. They waved their swords and sabers at the same time. Holding the Sword of Origin Restoration, Lin Tianling smiled. Squatting slightly, he rushed out like lightning. Puff! Blood floated up. The throat of the person at the front of the Mo clan was pierced. With a bang, he fell into a pool of blood. Sword of Lightning! There are 6 people left. Let's see if you can hold on until the others come to help. Lin Tianling smiled. The faces of the 6 people from the Mo clan changed slightly. In an instant, One of them was killed. Don't be careless. This little bastard is not simple. Let's work together to kill him. One of them said in a deep voice. The death of one person was not enough to make the 6 people afraid. They worked together and attacked Lin Tianling together. Boom! The 6 people were all strong. Their combined strength was extremely terrifying. Lin Tianling raised the corner of his mouth. He did not dodge and rush toward the 6 people. He would be afraid to face dozens of people at the same time, but facing only 6 people, he had no pressure. Crack! 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 3 consecutive crisp sounds rang out. Lin Tianling swung his sword and broke the weapons of 3 people. This is a spiritual weapon? One of them was shocked. Staring at the long sword in Lin Tianling's hand, their faces changed. Lin Tianling's face was indifferent. He rushed forward in a flash. Using the yin-yang steps, Lin Tianling shuttled through the encirclement of the 6 people. The first style of the shocking wind sword art was used. Sword chi flew out. One of the 6 people was swept by the sword chi. Blood splattered everywhere, and he was sent flying on the spot. Mo Hung! Someone shouted. At this moment, a flash of light rushed toward this person like lightning. Lin Tianling rushed over and used the sword of lightning. In a flash, the stone sword cut open this person's throat. With a bang, this person fell to the ground and died on the spot. 3 people left. Lin Tianling looked at the last few people with an indifferent expression. In the blink of an eye, 4 people were killed. The last 3 people's faces changed, revealing a fearful expression. At this moment, footsteps were heard from afar. The middle-aged man in green and the others avoided the Iron Earth Bulls and rushed over with more than 10 people. Seeing this, the 3 of them let out a sigh of relief. Little bastard, in order to kill you, the Mo clan sent out many people. Today, you will die without a doubt. One of them said coldly. Glancing at the distance, Lin Tianling's eyes fell on the 3 people again. The corner of his mouth curled up. That moment will not come. At least, you won't see it. Hearing this, the 3 people's faces changed. What do you want to do? Just kill you, Lin Tiantan said indifferently. The long sword in his hand turned and a fierce sword chi suddenly spread out. The shocking wind sword was slashed out with a clanging sound. Suddenly, the space within a few feet was completely covered by sword chi. Seeing this, the 3 people's faces changed. This sword chi made them feel terrified. Stop! In the distance, the middle-aged man in green was also moved and shouted loudly. Unfortunately, it was too late. Die, Lin Tianling said. The dense sword chi fell down like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves, drowning the 3 people in the blink of an eye. Puff! 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 Blood splattered. The 3 people of the Mo clan were penetrated by the dense sword chi and fell to the ground. At this moment, the middle-aged man in green arrived. Bastard! Looking at the 7 corpses on the ground, the middle-aged man in green was furious and his eyes were about to pop out. These people were the elites of the clan. 7 of them died at once. To the clan, it was a huge loss. Lin Tianling stood with his sword and glanced at the middle-aged man in green and the others. You came to kill me and became angry because a few of you died. This scene is so ugly and disgusting, Lin Tianling mocked. Including the middle-aged man in green, there were 13 people surrounding him at this moment. These people together could make him feel pressured, but they did not make him feel threatened like before. Therefore, he no longer retreated. What did you say? The middle-aged man in green roared. I said you are disgusting, Lin Tiantan said indifferently. I said your Mo clan is disgusting. The middle-aged man in green was furious. The others also looked gloomy. Staring at Lin Tianling, the middle-aged man in green tried to calm down. He said coldly, Don't think that you are amazing just because you killed 7 people of my Mo clan. My Mo clan knows everything about you. You have a low-level body refinement skill, Shadow Fire Fist, a middle-level body refinement skill, Shocking Wind Sword Art. Now that you are at the 8th level of body refinement, you are indeed very strong. However, this is the end. You may be able to deal with 7 people, but now that you are facing 13 people, I want to see how you will deal with it. Your investigation is very thorough, but are you sure you did not miss anything? Lin Tianling narrowed his eyes. The middle-aged man in green's face sank. What do you mean? Lin Tianling took a step forward. The origin returning sword vibrated slightly. Suddenly, a tyrannical thunder sword sound rang out. That is what I mean! The thunder rumbled and silver lightning arcs intertwined on the origin returning sword. Immediately, Lin Tianling rushed out. One sword. An ear-piercing cold sound rang out. In Lin Tianling's hand, the origin returning sword swung out. Puff! Blood splattered. In an instant, one of the 13 people was killed and fell into a pool of blood. Such a scene immediately made everyone's expression change. You! The middle-aged man in green was shocked and said angrily, This is not the shocking wind sword art, nor is it the shadow fire fist. When did you learn other martial arts? As he roared, the middle-aged man in green ordered the others to attack. In an instant, the light of the sword and the shadow of the sword swept across the space. Including the middle-aged man in green, the 12 people surrounded Lin Tianling in the center. 2 swords. With a puff, another person from the Mo family was killed. The wound was charred black as if he was struck by lightning. In this space, thunder rumbled. Silver lightning arcs intertwined around Lin Tianling's body, as if he was the incarnation of the thunder god. The speed of his sword was not as fast as the lightning sword, but the power of his sword was stronger than the shocking wind sword. Every sword was extremely tyrannical. 3 swords. Like the roar of a thunder dragon, a person from the Mo family was pierced between his eyebrows and his head exploded with a bang. Azure Thunder Sword Art, the sword was like thunder, and every sword was fatal. With the origin returning sword in hand, Lin Tianling used the duality steps and weaved through the encirclement of the Mo family. At this moment, every sword strike carried the power of thunder. Even the middle-aged man in green who was at the peak of the 9th layer of the refinement realm couldn't help but tremble. 4 swords. Thunder roared and a blinding light flashed across. Another person from the Mo family fell to the ground. In Lin Tianling's hand, the origin returning sword was almost covered by the dense lightning. With the flow of his true yuan, the thunder flame pig's power of thunder within his true yuan was infinitely magnified. It then merged into the sword intent and sword light, causing the sword intent to carry the power of thunder, and the sword light to carry the power of thunder. This was the Azure Thunder Sword Art. 5 swords. The cold voice floated up again. Like the call of the Grim Reaper, it took the life of another person from the Mo family. Looking at the current Lin Tianling, everyone was terrified. Damn it! The middle-aged man in green's heart trembled. He waved the 400-gene black iron halberd with an imposing aura. Send the signal to the family head! The information was wrong! Chapter 71. The middle-aged man was terrified. The power Lin Tian displayed was beyond the information he received. This kind of overbearing sword technique was never mentioned in the information collected by the Mo clan. Release the signal! Quick! The middle-aged man shouted. As the middle-aged man's words fell, a ray of light shot into the sky and exploded like fireworks. Lin Tian looked up at the sky and frowned slightly. Just you wait. It won't be long before my clan's Divine Pulse Realm experts arrive. Today, you will die, the middle-aged man said coldly. Lin Tian's face darkened, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Before that, I will kill all of you, Lin Tianling said. With a twist of his right hand, the sword of origin vibrated, and the Azure Thunder Sword technique was used again. Pooh! Blood gushed out from the sword, and a Mo clan expert's head flew out. Bastard! The middle-aged man roared. In the blink of an eye, including the previous 7, his Mo clan had lost 13 people. 13 people, all of whom were in the 8th level of the body refinement realm. Kill! With a roar, the middle-aged man held the black iron halberd and smashed it at Lin Tian like a stick. Lin Tian's eyes were cold. He clenched his left hand into a fist, and the shadow fist turned into dense fist shadows. With a bang, the fist collided with the halberd. Lin Tian and the middle-aged man retreated at the same time. You! The middle-aged man's expression changed. His black iron halberd weighed 400 pounds, and with his 9th level of the body refinement realm, he was invincible under the divine pulse realm in terms of strength. But now, his full-strength halberd was blocked by someone's bare hands. Humph! Lin Tianling laughed. The sword of origin vibrated, and a dense sword light burst out. After 9 days in the Wild Waves heavy array, his physical strength had been tempered to the point that it was incomparably strong. In terms of pure strength, he was comparable to a 9th level body refinement realm expert. Clang! The sound of the sword was ear-piercing, and thunder rumbled. Lin Tian held the sword of origin and moved with the duality steps, like a flash of lightning. Pooh! After a dozen or so breaths of time, another person was killed. Blood dyed the ground red. The Azure Thunder Sword technique didn't have any special sword moves, but every move of the Azure Thunder Sword technique was tyrannical beyond compare. When the sword was unleashed, it carried the power of thunder, tyrannical and tyrannical. I'll hold him off. The rest of you, retreat first. We'll meet up with the others and kill him together. The middle-aged man in cyan roared. Lin Tian's strength was beyond his expectations. Lin Tian's strength was far beyond what was recorded in the information he had received. Up until now, the Mo clan had already lost 14 people. They couldn't afford to lose any more. These experts were the elites of the Mo clan. As he spoke, the middle-aged man stepped forward and pressed down on Lin Tian. The rest of the Mo family looked at each other and nodded. Good. Be careful, someone said. The remaining people naturally understood the middle-aged man's intention and immediately began to retreat. You want to leave? Lin Tianling smiled. If others did not offend him, he would not offend them. These people came to kill him, so he could only return the favor by killing them. Whoosh! With the yin and yang steps, he leaped over the middle-aged man in cyan and slashed down with the sword of origin. Shocking wind sword! As soon as he finished speaking, dense silver sword energy appeared and pressed down crazily. In an instant, screams were heard. Faced with this sword move that was comparable to an upper-class body-refining technique, 2 of the 5 Mo clan members who had just retreated a few steps were penetrated by the sword energy and died on the spot. Looking at this scene, the middle-aged man in cyan roared angrily and his cheeks were distorted. Boom! The long halberd in his hand trembled and a bright light lit up. He charged toward Lin Tian. The Mo clan's secret martial technique, middle-class body-refining technique, the berserk halberd technique. Go back! Lin Tianling shouted. The sword of origin vibrated. He gathered his true essence and slashed down fiercely. The sword of origin collided with the black iron halberd. Lin Tian and the middle-aged man in cyan retreated at the same time again. Taking advantage of the retreating momentum, Lin Tian spun his feet and slashed out with the lightning sword, cutting off the head of one of the Mo clan members. A short dagger suddenly appeared in his hand. He imbued it with true essence and threw it out fiercely. Puff! The short dagger imbued with true essence was shockingly sharp. It pierced through the back of the head of one of the Mo clan members. In the blink of an eye, another 4 people were killed. The middle-aged man in cyan's face was even more distorted. His expression was ferocious as he roared angrily. The other person was terrified and almost staggered as he fled into the distance. Lin Tian lifted his leg and kicked out a long saber beside his foot. Shio! The long saber cut through the air and pierced through the back of the man's chest, piercing through his heart. You're the only one left. Lin Tian tilted his head and looked at the middle-aged man in cyan. In fact, the people who were with the middle-aged man in cyan were not weak. They were much stronger than those at the 8th level of the body refinement realm. Unfortunately, these people were scared out of their wits by the Azure Thunder Sword technique. Naturally, they were defeated. The long sword in Lin Tian's hand trembled. Without any hesitation, he used the Azure Thunder Sword technique and pressed down on the middle-aged man in cyan. Ah! The middle-aged man in cyan roared and attacked Lin Tian with his halberd. The sword of origin collided with the black iron halberd, making clanging sounds. It's quite sturdy. Lin Tian squinted his eyes. The origin returning sword was a middle-grade spiritual weapon. As a sword, it was naturally extremely sharp. It was close to being able to cut through iron like it was mud. However, at this moment, it could only leave a sword mark on the black iron halberd. The middle-aged man in cyan roared and continued to attack Lin Tian with his halberd. Clang! 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 The sound of sword and halberd colliding continued to ring. Around them, old trees were heavily damaged. In the blink of an eye, the two had fought for half an hour. The peak of the 9th level of the body refinement realm is indeed not simple, Lin Tian thought. Lin Tian raised his head and looked at the sky. The sky was almost completely dark. Lin Tian's face sank. He knew that he could not delay any longer. The quintessence in his body had already been mostly consumed. If he delayed any longer, it would not be good for him. Taking a deep breath, he stared at the middle-aged man in cyan. He raised his right hand and the sword of origin suddenly disappeared. It was put back into the stone ring. The middle-aged man in cyan was slightly shocked. What did you do? Looking down, the middle-aged man's eyes fell on Lin Tian's right middle finger. He was shocked. Stone ring? As a master of a martial arts family, the middle-aged man in cyan was no stranger to stone rings. His Mo family had a stone ring, which was the symbol of the Mo family's inheritance. Only the head of the family was qualified to wear it. You actually have such a treasure! The middle-aged man in cyan was surprised and happy. The ferocious look on his face disappeared and was replaced by a greedy expression. The value of a single stone ring was shockingly high. How ugly! Lin Tianling laughed. He squatted down slightly, clenched his fist, and used the duality steps to rush toward the middle-aged man in cyan like lightning. Seeing this, the middle-aged man in cyan was slightly shocked. But then, the middle-aged man in cyan showed a mocking expression. You don't have enough true essence? Staring at Lin Tian, he waved his black iron halberd and smashed down with his halberd skills. He laughed sinisterly and said, Perfect! After killing you, the stone ring is mine! I have to say, this is really an unexpected surprise. Boom! The violent halberd technique was activated even more by the middle-aged man in cyan, and a gust of wind could not help but roll up. At this moment, Lin Tian suddenly jumped up. His clenched fist loosened and turned into a palm. His right hand clenched into a fist. The corner of his mouth raised slightly. Vaguely, a true essence sword appeared in his hand. Lightning sword! As the 4 words fell, there was a swoosh sound and a splash of blood. The middle-aged man in cyan was still waving his halberd, but his body stopped. In his throat, a glaring bloody hole was so clear that blood kept gushing out. Why? Moving his lips, the middle-aged man in cyan fell to the ground with a bang. Until death, the middle-aged man in cyan did not understand why Lin Tian did not have a sword in his hand but pierced through his throat. Lin Tian landed on the ground. Looking at the middle-aged man's corpse, he turned and left. This move can be called the illusory sword dance. It sounds good. His voice floated in the air. Without a sword in his hand, the sword technique was even stronger. This move was Lin Tian's strongest trump card. After leaving this place, Lin Tian found a secret place. After swallowing 3 true essence dawn, he quickly operated the 4 extreme scriptures. After a big battle, his true essence was almost exhausted. 1. A faint silver light circulated. After half an hour, Lin Tian stood up and recovered all his true essence. The sun had completely set. Thinking about it, it would not be long before night enveloped the earth. I have to get out of here quickly, Lin Tian thought to himself. Standing up, Lin Tian found a direction and ran quickly. It was true that the Mo family had sealed all the exits of the dark forest, But he could not stay in the dark forest because of this. Previously, he could not leave because of the middle-aged man in cyan, but now it was different. As long as he carefully approached the edge of the dark forest, he could always find a chance to escape. There was a black robe in the stone ring. Even if the Mo family had sealed the dark forest tightly, the black robe might be useful. After all, although the Mo family was powerful, they could not interrogate everyone who entered the dark forest, right? Thinking of this, Lin Tian calmed down slightly and took out the black robe from the stone ring. Clang! At this moment, an immortal sword light fell from the sky. It was extremely terrifying. Lin Tian was shocked. He hurriedly retreated a few feet away. However, the black robe he had just taken out was shredded by the sword light. Not even a scrap was left. Little bastard, I found you! A cold voice resounded in the sky. Lin Tian raised his head and saw a giant bird circling in the sky. On the back of the giant bird stood two similar-looking middle-aged men. One of them was the elder of the 9 Yang martial house, Moe. Oh no! Lin Tian's expression changed. Without any hesitation, he quickly escaped into the depths of the dark forest. Lin Tian did not expect Moe to come personally. What surprised him even more was that the Mo family actually raised a demonic beast like the giant bird as a means of transportation. Moe was an expert at the 9th level of the Divine Vein realm. Lin Tian definitely wasn't his opponent. As for the middle-aged man beside Moe, Lin Tian roughly guessed who he was. When he glanced over, he saw the hatred in this person's eyes. Without a doubt, this person must be Mo Sen's father, the patriarch of the Mo clan, Mo Hai. It was rumored that the head of the Mo family, Mo Hai, was at the 4th level of the Divine Vein realm. One was at the 9th level of the Divine Vein realm while the other was at the 4th level of the Divine Vein realm. This was simply a desperate situation. Chapter 72. Lin Tian's heart was heavy. He glanced at the sky and immediately fled into the depths of the old forest. He had no chance of winning against these two people. The only thing he could do was to run. A cold snort came from the sky. In an instant, dense energy swords rained down like a rain of swords. The old trees around him collapsed one by one. Lin Tian was battered and exhausted. Lin Tian ran all the way into the depths of the old forest. After a while he stopped. He looked up at the sky and saw the giant bird flapping its wings. No matter how fast his duality steps was, he was not as fast as the bird circling in the sky. After all, the difference in their positions was too great. He was at an absolute disadvantage. Lin Tian landed on a huge rock and looked up at the sky. Run! Why aren't you running anymore? Mo Hai's cold voice rang out. Mo Hai stared at Lin Tian. His eyes were merciless, cruel, and numb. Lin Tian did not say anything. He just stared at the sky and did not make any moves. Instead of running pathetically under the giant bird's pursuit, it was better for him to stand still and save his energy. The giant bird circled in the sky, and energy swords slashed down again. Lin Tian used the duality steps and changed his position continuously in the small space, dodging the energy swords. Little bastard! Mo Hai's face was ferocious. Moe said in a low voice. This beast is extremely fast. Back then, Sinner suffered a great loss because of this speed. I'll kill him! Mo Hai said coldly. Moe nodded. Go. You're the best person to do it. Mo Hai stared at Lin Tian. Then, he leaped from a height of 600 feet and landed steadily on the ground. Lin Tian's eyes flickered. A divine pulse expert was indeed extraordinary. He could jump from such a high place and be unharmed. Die! Mo Hai landed. As soon as he spoke, he slapped at Lin Tian. His youngest son had died in Lin Tian's hands. He wanted nothing more than to eat Lin Tian's flesh and blood alive. The slap of a 4th-tier divine pulse expert seemed simple, but it was powerful. Lin Tian used the duality steps and dodged Mo Hai's palm with a whoosh. Looking up at the sky, Missouri was still standing on the back of the giant bird with his hands behind his back, looking down at him coldly. This made Lin Tian feel both relaxed and heavy at the same time. If Moe didn't come down, the pressure on him would naturally lessen, but it was also because Moe was standing high up in the sky that it was impossible for him to escape from their sight. Cursing inwardly, Lin Tian once again dodged Mo Hai's palm strike. Mo Hai's expression was gloomy. After a few consecutive attacks, he failed to land a hit on Lin Tian. With a wave of his right hand, a long sword appeared in his hand, causing Lin Tian's eyes to flicker. He vaguely saw a ring on the middle finger of Mo Hai's right hand. It was the stone ring. Clang! An ear-piercing sword whistle rang out as Mo Hai swung his sword, cutting down a large expanse of sword light. Lin Tian was shocked. Mo Hai's casual strike was comparable to his full-powered wind consternation sword. He took out the sword of Guiyuan and swung it with the wind-shocking sword, slashing out boundless sword light. Boom! When the two collided, Lin Tian was immediately sent flying. He felt a pain in his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. A divine vein expert couldn't block it at all. Without hesitation, Lin Tian clutched his chest and swung his sword backward, quickly escaping into the depths of the old forest. After clashing head-on with Mo Hai's sword aura had caused him to suffer heavy injuries. He felt as if his internal organs had shifted positions. "Little bastard, you can't escape! Today, I'll take your head and keep it in front of my son's grave," Mo Hai said coldly. Lin Tian didn't say anything and continued to flee. He executed the duality steps to the extreme and maintained a certain distance from Mo Hai. In terms of strength, he couldn't compete with a divine vein expert, but in terms of speed, he could barely compete with a fourth-layer divine vein expert. At this moment, a large expanse of sword light fell from the sky. Moe looked down at Lin Tian and tried to stop him. Moe was stronger than Mo Hai. Compared to Lin Tian, a ninth-layer divine vein expert was much stronger. Even without a sword in his hand, the sword light he released was still terrifying. Lin Tian was obstructed and had no choice but to change his direction. Clang! Mo Hai rushed over and pressed down with his sword, appearing in front of Lin Tian. Lin Tian turned pale with fright and held the origin-returning sword in front of his chest. Clang! Mo Hai's sword struck the origin-returning sword, and the sword in his hand instantly broke. Even so, a strong force was transmitted through the origin-returning sword to Lin Tian, sending Lin Tian flying. Lin Tian crashed into an old tree. He let out a muffled groan and spat out a mouthful of blood. Spiritual weapon! Mo Hai threw away the broken sword in his hand and stared at Lin Tian. His face turned even colder. With a wave of his right hand, another sword appeared in Mo Hai's hand. Upon closer inspection, this sword was more exquisite and gorgeous than the origin-returning sword in Lin Tian's hand. It was a high-grade spiritual weapon. Lin Tian glanced at it hurriedly, and his heart sank. He struggled to stand up, enduring the intense pain, and fled deeper into the dark forest. He was definitely not a match for Mo Hai in a head-on confrontation. He could only escape with his speed. If he could lure out some terrifying demonic beasts, he might have a chance to survive. You still want to escape? Today, you are destined to have no path to heaven and no door to hell, Mo Hai said. Lin Tian fled and activated the One Heaven Soul Art. Not long after, he sensed the aura of a Class 4 demonic beast. It was a wood-splitting gorilla, a Class 4 peak demonic beast that was comparable to a third-layer divine vein expert. Lin Tian gritted his teeth and aimed at that direction, slashing with his sword. The wood-splitting gorilla roared and rushed out, causing the ground to tremble. Lin Tian changed his direction and cleverly led the wood-splitting gorilla towards Mo Hai. Clang! An icy sword energy fell from the sky at extreme speed. With a puff, the wood-splitting gorilla's body was penetrated. After a scream, it fell to the ground, unable to stand up. Moe stood on the back of the giant bird with a cold expression. Lin Tian's heart skipped a beat. Moe was too strong. A Class 4 peak demonic beast couldn't even withstand a single blow from him. Die! Mo Hai caught up from behind and slashed with his sword. Lin Tian countered with the sword of origin restoration. The sword shook violently and was sent flying again. After being injured several times, Lin Tian crashed into an old tree. Blood gushed out of his mouth and dyed his chest red. Mo Hai approached step by step with a high-grade spirit artifact. Run! Keep running! Mo Hai said coldly. With his back against the trunk of the old tree, Lin Tian switched the sword of origin restoration to his left hand. When Mo Hai approached, he suddenly jumped up and performed the Sky Thunder Sword technique with his left hand. The sound of thunder instantly resounded in the surroundings. Sky Thunder Sword technique! On the back of the giant bird, Mo Yi's expression froze. As an elder of the Nine-Yang martial house, he naturally knew about the Azure Thunder Sword art. I never thought that this little bastard would choose this set of martial technique and even cultivate it to the entry stage. No wonder Mo Hing and the others are in a predicament. The Sky Thunder Sword technique was the most difficult martial technique in the Nine-Yang martial house. Although it was very dangerous in the beginning and 70% of the technique was missing, its power was undeniable. Lin Tian chose this martial technique and cultivated it to such a level. Mo Yi vaguely felt a trace of threat. This little bastard, no matter what, we have to get rid of him. Boom! The sword roared like thunder. In Lin Tian's left hand, the sword of origin restoration turned into a beam of lightning. Mo Yi looked down with his hands behind his back and coldly said to himself, If your cultivation is not enough, it will be useless in the end. Mo Hai was in the 4th layer of the Divine Vein realm. With his cultivation, he could completely ignore the Sky Thunder Sword technique executed by Lin Tian, who was in the 8th layer of the Body Refinement realm. Humph! Mo Hai coldly snorted and casually swept the sword in his hand to block the sword of origin restoration. With a clang, the two swords collided. The sword of thunder roared and silver arcs of lightning intertwined, crackling. At this moment, Lin Tian revealed a cruel smile. He raised his right hand and a peerless sword intent spread out. He pushed the sword of lightning to the extreme. A dazzling sword light shot out from his right hand and struck forward like lightning, aiming straight for Mo Hai's throat. Without a sword in his hand, he used an illusory sword dance. Careful! In the sky, Missouri Yi's expression changed. At the same time, Mo Hai felt a chill run down his spine. He sensed a fatal threat in his heart. Mo Hai dodged to the side and pulled back his sword to block the attack. Pooh! Blood splattered and Mo Hai was sent flying. His chest was blood-red and blood splattered everywhere. Lin Tian was also sent flying by Mo Hai's sword. Blood gushed out of his mouth again. Staring at Mo Hai, who was sent flying, Lin Tian cursed in his heart. A 4th layer of the Divine Vein realm was indeed terrifying. At such a close distance, Mo Hai actually dodged his killing blow. After a pause, he turned around and ran without any hesitation. Mo Hai was lying on the ground. With his current strength, he could definitely kill Mo Hai. However, Mo Yi was still in the sky. He didn't think he could kill Mo Hai under Mo Yi's nose. There was no hope at all. Mo Yi jumped down from the sky and landed beside Mo Hai. Second brother, how are you? Mo Yi helped Mo Hai up. I'm fine. Blood gushed out of Mo Hai's mouth. He had avoided a fatal blow, but he was still seriously injured. Staring at Lin Tian, who was running away, Mo Hai's face was extremely sinister. Mo Yi took out a pill and gave it to Mo Hai. You stay here and heal. Leave him to me. Thank you, big brother, Mo Hai said. Mo Yi nodded, stood up, and coldly chased after him. Lin Tian fled. The old trees on both sides quickly retreated. At this moment, blood gushed out of his mouth, and his speed slowed down a lot. Clang! A sword gleam shot out from behind him, sweeping through everything in its path. With a boom, the sword gleam slashed to the side. It was like a bomb had gone off. The old trees collapsed and boulders were split open. Lin Tian was sent flying by the force. He coughed up blood again in the air. Lin Tian glanced behind him. His heart sank. Moe had caught up. Damn it! Gritting his teeth and enduring the intense pain, Lin Tian charged into the depths of the dark forest. Moe chased after him unhurriedly. From time to time, he would send out energy swords. While destroying the old trees, they also left bloody marks on Lin Tian's body. In a few short moments, Lin Tian's clothes were almost torn to shreds. His entire body was dyed red with blood. It was a wretched sight. Moe was even faster than Lin Tian. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Lin Tian and kicked him in the chest. Bang! Lin Tian was blasted flying and collided fiercely with an old tree. Keep running, Moe said coldly. With his hands behind his back, facing Lin Tian, who was in the 8th layer of body refinement realm, Moe treated him like a toy. Lin Tian used the origin returning sword to support his body and stood up. With a whoosh, Moe appeared in front of him and swept out his foot again. Cough! Lin Tian coughed up blood in the air. With a bang, he fell to the ground. The sound of bones breaking could be heard. He struggled to stand up again. In return, Moe kicked him a third time. Bang! He crashed into the old tree again. The origin returning sword fell to the side. Lin Tian didn't even have the strength to move. Moe walked toward Lin Tian with his hands behind his back. His eyes were cold. Looking at the approaching Moe, Lin Tian tried his best to stand up. Unfortunately, it was futile. At this moment, his entire body was covered in blood, and his vision was blurry. Just the slightest movement would cause intense pain in his body. This pain was even more intense than when he was refining his internal organs. Lin Tian felt as if his internal organs were being torn apart. Moe walked closer. True essence flowed in his right hand and pressed down on Lin Tian. Cripple your cultivation and chop off your head in front of Lin Er's grave, Moe said coldly. Looking at Moe's right hand, Lin Tian struggled with all his strength, but it was useless. Moe's expression was cold. His right hand finally approached and pressed down. One! At this moment, a faint light spread out from Lin Tian's body. It seemed incomparably gentle, but it was overbearing. With a bang, it sent Moe flying. End of chapter. Chapter 73. Moe flew backward and landed on the ground with a bang, spitting out a mouthful of blood. His expression changed. Moe raised his head and looked in the direction of Lin Tian. At this moment, Lin Tian was wrapped in a faint light. Then, this soft light gradually gathered and quickly merged together. Not long after, a beautiful little girl condensed and formed. This is? Moe was aghast. A ball of light rushed out of a martial artist's body, turning into a little girl. He had cultivated martial arts for several decades and was about to step into the Sea of Consciousness realm, but he had never seen such a scene before. He had never even heard of it before. With his vision blurred, Lin Tian looked forward and suddenly trembled. Little purple. His lips moved slightly, and bright red blood flowed down the corner of his mouth. Lin Tian was very weak at the moment, but his eyes were still wide open. Half a month ago, when he parted with the little girl, he searched for a long time but could not find her. Now they met again. The little girl lowered her head and looked at Lin Tian, her pupils suddenly constricting. At this moment, Lin Tian's clothes were torn, and his body was stained with blood. He was as miserable as one could imagine. The little girl was barefooted, her white dress fluttering. She looked only 11 years old, but she was like the noblest fairy in the world. Turning her face, the little girl's eyes fell on Moe in the distance. You heard him. Her little mouth moved slightly, and a cold voice came out. In an instant, a domineering pressure came down from the sky, and the entire dark forest trembled. The clouds in the sky seemed to have sensed this terrifying aura and stopped moving. Moe trembled, his whole body trembling. Looking at the violet fairy who looked only about 11 years old, Moe only felt like he was facing an ancient demon mountain. That terrifying pressure made him unable to even move a finger. Behind him, Lin Tian was also shocked. Was this that little purple? Was that weak and timid little girl so scary? The violet fairy stared at Moe, her beautiful eyes indifferent. Banished to the 18th level of hell, never to be reincarnated. The cold voice sounded again. Behind Moe, a bloody crack appeared, and the screams of ghosts came out. Moe was horrified, showing an extremely frightened expression. Say, Senior, spare me, Moe said in a trembling voice. For the first time, the feeling of death was so clear, as if it was visible to the naked eye. Moe only felt extreme fear. The violet fairy stared ahead coldly, her beautiful eyes frighteningly deep. A giant ghost claw reached out from the bloody rift and grabbed Moi as if it was grabbing a chicken, pulling him into the bloody rift. Then, the bloody crack closed with a crack. Behind him, Lin Tian stared at this scene and felt his head explode. What was that? Martial techniques? Was there such a terrifying martial skill in this world? Was this, really that little Z? The blood-red crack swallowed Moe and then closed as if it had never existed. It was also at this time that the domineering pressure disappeared. The violet fairy turned around and stared at the disheveled Lin Tian. Her cold expression was replaced with the same smile she had when they first met. Squatting down, the violet fairy moved closer to Lin Tian and sized him up seriously. Little Z? Lin Tian subconsciously shouted. The violet fairy looked at Lin Tian. After a moment, she smiled and said, You're the first person to call me that. Lin Tian opened his mouth, wanting to say something, wanting to ask something, but he didn't know how to say it. That scene just now was too scary. He still couldn't be sure. Was this really the little girl from half a month ago? As if knowing what Lin Tian was thinking, the violet fairy said, It's me. Receiving a positive answer, Lin Tian was both surprised and happy. At this time, the violet fairy's body suddenly became transparent. What's wrong with you? Lin Tian was shocked. It's just a trace of my divine sense. That move just now exhausted all my power, the violet fairy said. Her figure quickly faded and was about to disappear. I'll leave the injury to you to heal yourself. Looking at Lin Tian, she suddenly revealed a sly smile and whispered into Lin Tian's ear. Let's meet again if fate wills it, big brother. With that, the violet fairy's figure completely disappeared with a whoosh. Lin Tian opened his mouth, but he didn't have time to say anything. Staring at the spot, Lin Tian was extremely shocked. That little violet, she actually... Lin Tian muttered to himself. That power just now was too terrifying. That figure just now was just a trace of my divine sense. When a cultivator reached the sea of consciousness realm, they would open up a sea of consciousness in their head, and possess the power of divine sense. However, Lin Tian had never heard of a trace of divine sense being able to transform into a body, and even possess such terrifying power. Somewhat stunned, Lin Tian shook his head after a while. Let's get out of here first. With difficulty, Lin Tianyi took out several true essence pills from the stone ring and threw them into his mouth. Then, he operated the four extremities meridian to quickly recover his true essence and heal his injured body. After a quarter of an hour, he struggled to stand up and picked up the sword of Guiyuan that had fallen in the distance. Using the sword to support his body, he staggered into the distance. Moe was dead and Mo Hai was seriously injured. But there were still many ordinary Mo family members inside and outside the dark forest. His current situation was still not optimistic. After walking for a while, Lin Tian didn't know where he had gone. He was going to find a hidden place to heal his injuries. Suddenly, a demonic beast's roar sounded. In front of him, behind an old tree, a demonic beast about 10 feet tall jumped out. Level 2 demonic beast, Poison Earth Tiger. Lin Tian's expression changed. The Poison Earth Tiger was at most comparable to an expert in the 6th layer of the body refinement realm. If it was on a normal day, Lin Tianyi could kill it with a slap. But at this time, this little Poison Earth Tiger was a fatal threat to him. The Poison Earth Tiger roared, jumped up, and rushed toward Lin Tian. Oh no! Lin Tian cursed. He raised the sword of Guiyuan with difficulty and slashed forward. Almost at the same time, the sound of air breaking rang. A silver arrow rushed over his head and pierced the poison earth tiger's head. The poison earth tiger screamed and fell to the ground. It twitched a few times and died on the spot. Lin Tian's heart skipped a beat. He tilted his head and looked behind. Hey! Brother! A well-dressed young man holding a longbow and carrying a silver arrow quickly ran over. Lin Tian was on guard. When the well-dressed young man came closer, he suddenly froze. This well-dressed young man seemed to be one of the people who fought against the Thunder Flame Pig not long ago. When he lured the Thunder Flame Pig away, the other party greeted him. It's you! Why are you here? Lin Tian Andao. When he opened his mouth, it immediately affected his injuries. It hurt so much that his cheeks twitched, and he almost lost his balance. The well-dressed young man was about the same age as Lin Tian. He casually said and reached out to support Lin Tian. I was on my way home and happened to pass by here. I wanted to gain some experience. Seeing Lin Tian's miserable state, the well-dressed young man said with some surprise, I say, brother, what happened to you? This injury doesn't look like it was caused by the Thunder Flame Pig. Lin Tian shook his head and didn't want to say more. Seeing that Lin Tian didn't say anything, the well-dressed young man didn't ask any more. Right, I'm Zhui. What's your name? The well-dressed young man asked. Lin Tian thought for a moment and said, Lin Tian. At this moment, many people were walking over from afar. Lin Tian had seen these people before. They were with the well-dressed young man. The well-dressed young man looked at Lin Tian and said enthusiastically, Brother, your injuries are a little serious. I'm afraid it's dangerous to walk alone in the dark forest. Why don't you come with us for the time being? Lin Tian thought for a moment and said, Sure. The well-dressed young man's eyes were very bright. He gave off a carefree feeling that didn't care about trifles. He didn't look like a treacherous person. The well-dressed young man smiled and sized up Lin Tian. He looked at an old servant not far away and said, Oldly, bring a set of clean clothes for my brother to change into. Yes, young master, the old servant said. Soon, the old servant came back with a black coat. Lin Tian glanced at it and said apologetically, I'm sorry, old mister. Do you have a robe? The kind that can cover my face. There were still many Mo family disciples inside and outside the dark forest. He couldn't be careless. The old servant was stunned for a moment and said, Yes, please wait for a moment. The old servant went back and soon came back with a gray robe. Many thanks, old mister. Lin Tian thanked him. You're welcome, little brother is too polite. The old servant shook his head and said with a smile, If it weren't for little brother's help, we would have been eaten by the lightning flame pig. That's right, brother. You were too cool at that time. If it weren't for you, we would have been finished. Zhu clenched his fist and said. Not far away, the group of strong men in armor also showed kind and grateful smiles at Lin Tian. Lin Tian returned a smile and stood up with Zhu Yi's help. Oldly, bring the jade fragrance pill, Zhu Yi said. The old servant called, Oldly, nodded and took out a jade bottle. He poured out a fingernail-sized pill. Brother, this is a healing pill. The effect is good, Zhu Yi said with a smile. Lin Tiandao thanked him and placed the pellet into his mouth. He wasn't worried that there was a problem with the pill. In his current condition, if Zhu Yi and the others wanted to harm him, they wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Any one of them could kill him. As the pill entered his mouth, a fragrant smell spread. Lin Tian immediately felt better. The sky was completely dark. They were not far from the edge of the dark forest. Zhu Yi and the others were preparing to leave. Lin Tian covered his face with a gray robe and followed Zhu Yi and the others out of the dark forest. Along the way, Lin Tian saw many figures flashing in the dark forest. They were all Mo family disciples. Soon, the group reached the exit of the dark forest. Stop! The exit was indeed blocked by Mo family people. Staring at Lin Tian in a gray robe, one of the Mo family members walked over and said in a deep voice, Sorry, we are looking for someone. Please take off your robe. This was a peak 9th layer body refinement realm expert. At the same time, the nearby Mo family disciples surrounded him. Under the gray robe, Lin Tian's heart sank. At this moment, a middle-aged man walked out. His voice was cold as he stared at the Mo family person and said, "Get out of the way! Sir, we just want to." The Mo family person's face sank. However, when the middle-aged man took out a gold medal and placed it in front of his chest, the Mo family person's face suddenly changed. Taking a step back, the Mo family person bowed and said cautiously, "I'm sorry. I've offended you. Please wait." Chapter 74. Lin Tian was a little surprised. Looking at the attitude of the Mo family, it seemed that Zhu Yi's group had a big background. However, although he was surprised, he didn't intend to ask. After all, this was someone else's territory. The burly man took back the gold medal and nodded respectfully to Zhu Yi. "Let's go," Zhu Yi said. The group of people walked slowly and gradually disappeared into the distance under the respectful gaze of the leader of the Mo family. "Leader they are, why did you?" a disciple of the Mo family asked in a low voice. "Shut up! Don't ask what you shouldn't ask," the leader of the Mo family said in a deep voice. The person who asked shrank his neck and didn't dare to say anything. After leaving the dark forest, Lin Tian followed Zhu Yi and the others for more than 1,000 feet. Looking from here, there was no trace of the dark forest. "Brother, speaking of which, those people seem to be targeting you. Why?" Zhu Yi was curious. Lin Tian thought for a while and didn't hide anything. He simply explained what happened. Hearing this, Zhu Yi was indignant. "Shameless!" Lin Tian smiled and didn't say anything. The group of people walked together, talking and laughing. The atmosphere was good. Soon after, a fork appeared in front of them. "Brother, you can go back to Fengjian City alone, right?" Zhu Yi asked. From the conversation just now, Zhu Yi knew that Lin Tian was in Fengjian City. Lin Tian said, "It's no problem to leave the dark forest. Well, let's part here. We have to go from the right side of the fork." Zhu Yi smiled. Lin Tian nodded. "Okay, thank you for this time." Speaking of which, it was indeed thanks to Zhu Yi and the others' help this time. If not for them, it would be difficult for him to walk out of the dark forest safely. "You're welcome, brother," Zhu Yi said. The old servant and the others smiled and nodded at Lin Tian and walked to the right side of the fork. "Goodbye." Lin Tian waved his hand and said goodbye to Zhu Yi and the others. Lin Tiankai watched as Zhu Yi and the others left. Only when they were far away did he head towards Fengjian City. When Lin Tian returned to his residence in the martial house, Lin Shi was already asleep. Because he had left a small note before he left, Lin Shi wasn't worried. Arriving at the top of the pavilion, Lin Tian quickly circulated the four extremities meridian. Buzz! Starlight sprinkled down, and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth surged. The light was gentle. Facing Mo High and Moe, he had suffered almost fatal injuries. Even with the help of Zhu Yi's healing pills, he had only recovered a little and was still far from fully recovered. Stars twinkled in the sky. It was not until 6 hours had passed that Lin Tian opened his eyes again. Mo High and Moe had attacked him viciously, but fortunately, they hadn't hurt his core. At this moment, Shi Yan's wounds were half healed, and he had recovered 80% of his essence, chi, and soul. Mo clan! Looking in the direction of the Mo family, Lin Tian's eyes were extremely cold. Standing up, Lin Tian stretched his body and walked down from the top of the pavilion. Today, in the dark forest, he had suffered a lot. After recovering a little from his injuries, he didn't cultivate but returned to his room to rest. Closing his eyes, Lin Tian soon fell into a deep sleep. The next day, Lin Tian didn't wake up until noon. On the small wooden table beside his bed was a simple meal as usual. Obviously, it was prepared by Lin Shi. Lin Tian smiled. After washing his face and eating, he washed the bowl and chopsticks. Then, he walked out of his residence and walked towards the Wild Waves Array in the martial arts practice field. After yesterday's battle, he had a deeper understanding of the rules of survival in this world. Law? No. Reason? No. In this world, whoever's fist is the law. Whoever's strength is the reason. At the Wild Waves Array, Luo Shao was guarding it. Kid, you're here again. Luo Shao greeted. Yes, senior, I want to go in and cultivate. Lin Tian Andao. Every month, he had 8 days to cultivate in the Wild Waves Heavy Array or the Qi Condensation Grand Array. In total, he had spent 6 days cultivating this month, and there were only 2 days left. He had a total of 24 hours. Good! Luo Shao looked at Lin Tian and was slightly surprised. 8th body refinement layer? Half a month ago, he was only at the 7th body refinement layer. Now, he had reached the 8th body refinement layer. This speed was a bit exaggerated. Pausing, Luo Shao quickly put away his surprise and praised. Good kid, you're really not bad. Okay, go in. Thank you, senior. Lin Tian bowed. If others treated him warmly, he would naturally return the favor. Entering the Wild Waves Array, the familiar pressure came. Lin Tian felt as if a huge rock was placed on his shoulder. However, Lin Tian was already familiar with this level of gravity. Walking in this area, Lin Tian's footsteps were gentle. When he arrived at the 3 times gravity zone, he paused for a moment and then stepped over. In an instant, Lin Tian felt his body sink. It was as if his legs were filled with mercury. Stepping into the 3 times gravity zone, he felt the same as the first time he stepped into the Wild Waves Array. His entire body was in pain. Worthy of being called the 3 times gravity zone, Lin Tian thought. Taking a deep breath, Lin Tianyi stepped forward and began to adapt to the 3 times gravity zone. There were nearly 10 people cultivating in the 2 times gravity area, and they were not far from where Lin Tian was. Seeing Lin Tian step into the 3 times gravity area from the 2 times gravity area, many people's eyes widened. Among them were new disciples of the martial house like Lin Tian. Seeing this scene, they were even more shocked. Lin Tian? It's him! He actually can already step into the 3 times gravity zone. Is this a 9-star talent? It's too abnormal. Don't look for objective reasons. Instructor Luo said before that being able to walk in this array has nothing to do with one's talent. Looking at Lin Tian in the 3 times gravity zone, many of the new disciples were in awe. Lin Tian was not far from these people, so he naturally heard their voices. However, he did not care. It was his first time entering the 3 times gravity zone, so it was very difficult for him to move. He could barely take a few steps, and even then, the burden on his body was frighteningly large. The sharp pain continued to attack him. Lin Tian felt that his physical strength was quickly depleting. Lin Tian did not care about this at all. On this day, he stayed in the Wild Waves formation for a total of 6 hours. After 6 hours, he walked out. Good boy, I heard you stepped into the 3 times gravity zone. Luo Zhao's eyes flashed. Lin Tian nodded. It's still very difficult. 6 hours is my limit. Very difficult? Luo Zhao smiled bitterly. Don't undervalue yourself. I only dared to enter when I was at the peak of the 9th level of the refinement realm. Moreover, I only lasted 2 hours in the 3 times gravity zone. Sizing up Lin Tian, Luo Zhao was somewhat speechless. You little brat, I didn't wrong you at all when I said you were a little monster. Senior, you're too kind. Lin Tian said humbly. Lin Tian was a little embarrassed. He thought to himself that fortunately, he did not say that he was injured. Otherwise, Luo Zhao would probably capture him and do research on him. After bidding farewell to Luo Zhao, Lin Tian returned to his residence. After washing up, he went to the top floor. He began to inscribe the spirit gathering rune for his evening cultivation. I need to get some moon drops to inscribe the Gale rune. When the time comes, I'll give the Mo clan a big gift. Lin Tianling smiled. The spirit gathering rune was quickly inscribed. Without hesitation, Lin Tian took a deep breath and began to cultivate. The 4 extreme scriptures quickly circulated. With the help of the spirit-gathering rune, the surrounding spiritual chi of heaven and earth all gathered towards this place, continuously surging into Lin Tian's body. In the dark forest, the Mo clan was still pursuing Lin Tian's whereabouts. In the forest, Mo Hai's injuries had already recovered. He was personally inspecting the situation. What's going on? Where did Big Brother chase that little bastard? Mo Hai frowned. A full day and night had passed. Lin Tian was still nowhere to be found, and Moe had also disappeared without a trace. Patriarch. From afar, a Mo clan disciple ran over. What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry? Mo Hai's face darkened. Lin Tian and Moe were nowhere to be found. Mo Hai's mood was very bad. Patriarch, the disciples in the martial house sent news that Lin Tian has returned to the Nine-Yang martial house. The Mo clan disciple said. What? Mo Hai's expression changed. Yesterday, when Lin Tian was on the brink of death, his big brother Moe had personally chased after him. How could Moe disappear now, and Lin Tian return to the Nine-Yang martial house? Moe was a cultivator at the 9th firmament of the divine vein realm, and he was about to enter the spiritual sea realm. Lin Tian shouldn't have been able to escape from Moe. Are you sure that little bastard has returned to the martial house? Mo Hai's face darkened. The Mo clan disciple who came to report trembled. This subordinate has repeatedly asked. That Lin Tian has indeed returned to the martial house. How is that possible? Mo Hai was shocked and angry. Immediately, Mo Hai walked out of the dark forest and questioned the Mo clan disciples who were blocking the exit of the dark forest. Unfortunately, these people didn't see Lin Tian walk out of the dark forest. Mo Hai's heart sank, and an ominous feeling arose spontaneously. Leave a group of people to search for my big brother. The rest of you, return to the clan. Mo Hai said in a deep voice. At this moment, Mo Hai's face was very ugly, and it was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. His Mo clan had sent half of the clan's elites to hunt down Lin Tian. Even the patriarch and the strongest person in the clan, Moe, had come personally. However, in the end, 20 of the clan's elites had died, the strongest Moe had gone missing, and the hunted Lin Tian had appeared out of nowhere in the Nine-Yang martial house. Mo Hai felt that the Mo clan had been ruthlessly slapped in the face. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days had passed. For the past 3 days, Moe was still missing. As a martial house elder, he had disappeared for a few days and did not carry out his duties in the martial house. Naturally, the Nine-Yang martial house had to inquire about him. On this day, Sherdong and Mu Qing personally came to the Mo clan. My big brother was delayed by an extremely important matter. I estimate that it will take some time. Because he left in a hurry, he was unable to inform the martial house in time. I am very sorry. Mo Hai said. Although the Mo clan was a martial arts clan, it was still insufficient in front of the Nine-Yang martial house. The Nine-Yang martial house was established by the empire. Sherdong and Mu Qing frowned, but they didn't ask much. There are many matters in the martial house, and the elders cannot shirk their duties. If Patriarch Mo's big brother returns, please inform him to return to the martial house immediately. Mu Qing said. Yes, definitely. Mo Hai said. Mu Qing and Sherdong nodded and turned to leave the Mo clan. Chapter 75. Seeing Mu Qing and Sherdong walking away, Mo Hai's face turned gloomy. As the only martial family in Fengjian City, the Mo clan's biggest deterrent wasn't him as the clan head, but his elder brother, Moe. Whether it was his status as a martial house elder or his cultivation at the 9th level of the divine vein realm, it was enough to deter anyone. Pass down the order to send more men. We must find my elder brother's whereabouts as soon as possible. Mo Hai shouted. Yes, clan head. A Mo clan disciple received the order and quickly led a team of elites to the dark forest. In the main hall, Mo Hai was lost in thought as he looked into the distance. In these 3 days, Mo Hai sometimes wondered if something had happened to his elder brother, MOE. Otherwise, how could there be no news from him for 3 days? But every time he had such a thought, MOE would shake his head. An expert at the 9th level of the Divine Vein realm could even escape from a Class 7 demonic beast. How could something have happened to him? Elder brother, where are you? MOE murmured. Staring in the direction of the 9 Yang Martial House, MOE's eyes turned cold. MOE was missing, but Lin Tian returned to the 9 Yang Martial House safe and sound. This made his hatred for Lin Tian even stronger. He wanted to cut off Lin Tian's flesh and blood. At the 9 Yang Martial House. Today was the 63rd day since Lin Tian entered the 9 Yang Martial House. At night, starlight fell like the Milky Way, continuously converging at Lin Tian's residence. In the pavilion, Lin Tian had a focused expression as he circulated the 4 extreme meridians, guiding the heaven and earth spiritual chi and the power of stars into his organs as he forged again and again. Buzz! A faint silver light lingered on the surface of Lin Tian's body, and his breathing became smoother. The next day, just as dawn broke, Lin Tian stood up and walked towards the direction of the wild wave's heavy array after breathing in and out while facing the morning sun. Walking straight into the 3 times gravity zone, Lin Tian's eyes flashed as he took out the origin returning sword from the stone ring. In an instant, Lin Tian felt his right hand become heavy, and the hand holding the sword became unstable. The difference between holding a sword in the 3x gravity zone and the outside world is like heaven and earth, Lin Tian muttered to himself. Taking a deep breath, Lin Tian's eyes became serious. Azure Thunder Sword Technique! With a low shout, Lin Tian raised his right hand and started to operate the Azure Thunder Sword art. He slowly swung his long sword. Swinging his sword in this 3 times gravity zone, Lin Tian felt that his right hand was astonishingly heavy. His swinging motion was incomparably slow, almost as slow as a snail. But even so, Lin Tian did not stop. There was always a process to everything, and it was naturally impossible for him to be as free and easy as he was at the start. In the blink of an eye, 4 hours passed. Practicing the Azure Thunder Sword skill in the Wild Wave's heavy array consumed true essence much faster than usual. Therefore, even though this was the 2nd time Lin Tian had entered the 3 times gravity zone, the time he could last was actually shorter. Walking out of the array, Lin Tianwei took a few deep breaths. Kid, what happened today? Luo Xiao was perplexed. Yesterday, his complexion was only slightly pale. Today, after 4 hours, why was his condition worse? I did some vigorous exercise today, Lin Tian said embarrassedly. Vigorous exercise? Luo Xiao was slightly taken aback, but immediately understood. You were practicing martial skills in the array? Yes. Lin Tian now. Luo Xiao nodded. And this is a good idea. A few years ago, there were also genius disciples of the martial house who did this, and the results were not bad. If you can smoothly practice martial skills in the Wild Wave's heavy array, when you return to the outside world, whether it is your comprehension of martial skills or the power of your martial skills, they will all increase by a lot. After a pause, Luo Xiao continued. However, kid, I still say the same thing last time. You have to know when to stop and when to stop. Don't damage your body because of too much hard work. If you do that, it will be a waste of time. Lin Tian nodded and bowed. Thank you, senior, for your advice. Although he was confident, he was still very grateful for Luo Zhao's good intentions. After returning to his residence, Lin Tian rested for a few hours before returning to the pavilion to inscribe the spirit-gathering runes. Time always passed quickly, and Lin Tian's 1-month cultivation time in the Wild Wave's heavy array was up. Not long after, a new month came, and the cultivation time began to recalculate. He could once again enter the array to cultivate. On this day, Lin Tian had been in the 9 Yang Martial House for 69 days. Clang! In the 3 times gravity zone, the sound of a sword reverberated. Lin Tian circulated the Azure Thunder Sword art's general principles and swung his sword one after another. After entering the 3x gravity zone several times in a row, Lin Tian's body had completely adapted to this zone. Although the speed and power of his sword were far from comparable to the outside world, it was still powerful enough. With a single strike, thunder roared. Clang! 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 Gradually, as Lin Tian became more and more accustomed to the 3x gravity zone, the power of his sword became stronger and stronger. Every time he swung his sword, it was as if there was a bolt of lightning striking down. Not only was there the sound of the sword whistling, but there was also the sound of thunder rumbling. In the 2x gravity zone, many disciples were shocked by the sound. Who is this? He is actually cultivating in the 3x gravity zone. It's that Lin Tian. What kind of martial technique is he cultivating? How can it be so powerful in the 3x gravity zone? Could it be a divine vein realm martial technique? How is that possible? He is still far from reaching the divine vein realm. But this kind of power. Many people's hearts palpitated. After a few hours, Lin Tian felt a little exhausted and withdrew his sword. With a wave of his right hand, the origin returning sword returned to the stone ring. The moment the sword left his hand, Lin Tian felt as though his right hand had been liberated. It became several times more agile. After walking out of the array, Luo Xiao sized him up as though he was looking at a monster. Senior, you are. Lin Tian felt a little uncomfortable being stared at like that. All right. Hurry up and get lost. Looking at a brat like you, I feel like I have wasted all my years of cultivation. Luo Xiao scolded. When Lin Tian was cultivating the Azure Thunder Sword technique, he had created too much of a commotion. Even from outside the array, he could clearly feel the terrifying sword intent. If he could create such a commotion in the 3x gravity zone, what would happen in the outside world? This kind of strength had completely surpassed the standards of the 8th level of body refinement. Lin Tian blushed with shame. He knew that Luo Xiao was joking. After bowing, he quickly ran away. Time passed by day. Every day, Lin Tian would cultivate for 8 hours in the Frenzied Waves heavy formation, rest for 8 hours in the afternoon, and use the spirit-gathering runes to cultivate the 4 extreme scriptures at the top of the pavilion at night. Like this, after 7 days, Lin Tian had completely adapted to the 3x gravity zone. Even in this kind of environment, he could smoothly use the Azure Thunder Sword technique. Every slash was shockingly powerful. In these 7 days, the effects of cultivating the Azure Thunder Sword technique in the Wild Waves array were not bad. He had already comprehended 20% of this sword technique. Very quickly, another 3 days passed. On this day, walking in the martial house, Lin Tian felt that the entire martial house was slightly nervous. There are still 10 days until the Inner Palace disciple selection. This time, I wonder who will be lucky enough to enter the Inner Palace. Lucky? If you want to enter the Inner Palace, you can only rely on your strength. That's true. The disciples of the martial house were whispering. Lin Tian finally understood why he felt that the martial house was slightly nervous. It turned out that the Inner Palace disciple selection was about to begin. Thinking of the Inner Palace disciple selection, Lin Tian couldn't help but think of Zhou Hao. He suddenly sneered. During the Outer Palace ranking trial, in the Green Wind Ridge, Zhou Hao had plotted to kill him. It could be said that he was sinister and sinister. Lin Tian had always remembered that day's events. And the Inner Palace disciple selection was the day of the bet between the two of them. Lin Tian. A familiar voice floated from not far away. Lin Tian tilted his head and saw Sushu running towards him. Sushu was wearing a white dress today. With her fresh twin ponytails and beautiful face, she looked like a little princess. What's wrong, little Sushu? Lin Tian responded. Little Sushu? Sushu ground her teeth. Call me senior sister. Lin Tian rolled his eyes. How could he be willing? Seeing Lin Tian roll his eyes, Sushu snorted and said seriously. 10 days later is the Inner Palace disciple selection. It's also the day of the bet between you and Zhou Hao. What is your current cultivation level? Peak of the 8th layer of body refinement. Lin Tian Andao. Peak of the 8th layer of body refinement. Sushu couldn't believe it. I just reached the 8th layer of body refinement. You're higher than me? Hearing Lin Tian's words, Sushu was shocked. In just 2 months, Lin Tian actually went from the 5th layer of body refinement to the peak of the 8th layer of body refinement. Even if you're a 9-star talent, you're not that monstrous. Sushu stared. Can't help it. I'm just that monstrous. Lin Tian shrugged and looked at Sushu. He jokingly said, "Oh right, what's that saying again? The one who reaches the top is the teacher. I won't take advantage of you. You don't need to call me master. Call me senior brother. Go die." Sushu angrily said and ruthlessly kicked Lin Tian's foot. After this, Sushu suddenly sighed. What's wrong? Lin Tian was a bit strange. Sushu rolled her eyes. I have 2 pieces of news. One is good news and one is bad news. Which one do you want to hear first? Lin Tian. This girl, she's still using this trick. Let's hear the good news first. Lin Tian said. The good news is that Moe is missing. He's been missing for almost a month. No matter if it's the 9 Yang Martial House or the Mo family, they couldn't find a trace of Moe. It's as if he disappeared from the face of the earth. Sushu said. You have a grudge with the Mo family. Does this news make you happy? At the beginning, Mo said that Moe was delayed by something. But as the inner house election neared, the martial house became busier and busier. Moe still couldn't be found. So, Mu Qing and Sherdong came to visit again. At this time, Mo couldn't hide anymore and could only tell the truth. Sushu also heard this news from Mu Qing. Lin Tian pretended to be surprised. Moe is missing? And he's missing. There's no news. Sushu nodded. Then it's really good news. Lin Tian smiled. Moe was dragged into the terrifying bloody crevice. There was no doubt that not even his bones were left. It would be strange if there was any news. Looking at Sushu, Lin Tian said, What's the bad news? Chapter 76. Lin Tianwei was shocked. Zhou Hao had actually stepped into the divine pulse realm. This wasn't good news. When she saw Lin Tian fall silent, Sushu said, You don't have to be too worried. I'll tell Master about this. Moreover, even though Zhou Hao isn't much, he wouldn't go so far as to kill you. Lin Tian smiled and flicked Sushu's forehead. Naive girl. Back in Greenwind Ridge, Zhou Hao had plotted to kill him. Since the two of them had already signed a life and death contract, how could Zhou Hao show any mercy to him? Zhou Hao might not be merciless in front of the martial house, but he would definitely use some dirty tricks. Even if he didn't kill him, he would at least cripple him. Sushu covered her forehead and gritted her teeth at Lin Tian. What are you doing? Nothing. Lin Tian smiled. I just want to tell you not to worry. After all, he has just entered the Divine Pulse realm. Just entered the Divine Pulse realm? Sushu glared. She was worried after hearing the news, but this guy didn't seem to care at all. Even if he had just entered the Divine Pulse realm, he was still in the Divine Pulse realm. Don't worry about it. Lin Tian now. You're not worried? What am I worried about? Sushu puffed up her cheeks. Lin Tian smiled. He was grateful that Sushu was worried about him. Oh right, where are you going? Sushu asked. Wild Waves Formation. I'm going there to train my body. Lin Tian now. Wild Waves Formation. Sushu thought for a moment and said, I'll go too. Let's go together. Soon, the two arrived at the Wild Waves Formation. Little monster, you're here. Seeing Lin Tian arrive, Luo Xiao greeted him. Lin Tian. Ever since Luo Xiao saw him using the Azure Thunder Sword art in the 3 times zone, Luo Xiao changed the way he addressed him. Little monster made him sweat. Little monster? Sushu stared at Lin Tian curiously. Lin Tian was helpless and couldn't be bothered to say anything. After informing Luo Xiao, Lin Tian walked towards the center of the Wild Waves Formation. Sushu followed behind him. What a troublesome formation! As soon as she entered the array, Sushu began to mutter. Although her cultivation was at the 8th layer of the body refinement realm, she was still a girl and her body was a bit weak. Being in this wild wave array, the pressure from the enormous gravity made her feel very uncomfortable. It's normal to suffer a little on the path of martial arts. Otherwise, why would martial artists be more powerful than ordinary people? Lin Tian smiled. If you want to get something, you have to give something. Sushu looked at Lin Tian in surprise. I didn't expect you to say something so philosophical. Lin Tian was speechless. In this little girl's eyes, what kind of person was he? Passing through the 2 times gravity zone, the two of them were very relaxed. There was no need to mention Lin Tian. As for Sushu, she was already at the 8th layer of the body refinement realm, so the 2 times gravity was nothing to her. Moreover, this was not her first time here. Very quickly, the two of them walked a distance and arrived at the boundary between the 2 and 3 times gravity zone. Lin Tian walked forward, heading towards the 3 times gravity zone. Hey, what are you doing? Sushu pulled him back. What? Lin Tian was stunned. He pointed at the 3 times gravity zone and said, Over there. Over there? Sushu stared at him. That is the 3 times gravity zone. Without a cultivation at the 9th layer of the body refinement realm, you'll suffer for nothing. Do you have nothing better to do than to suffer? Ever since the Martial House was founded, this wild wave array had always existed. After so many years, after so many disciples, the adaptability of this wild wave array had been summed up by some people. For the 3 times gravity zone, one had to be at least at the 9th layer of the body refinement realm to enter, otherwise it would be very hard to withstand the pressure. If one tried to enter before reaching the 9th layer of the body refinement realm, it would cause great damage to one's body. Relax, I know what I'm doing, Lin Tianandao said. After he finished speaking, he casually walked over. After walking a few steps, he turned around to look at Sushu. Look! These days he had spent several hours cultivating in this wild wave array. He had already adapted to the 3 times gravity zone. You! Sushu stared at him with an expression of disbelief. If Lin Tian found it difficult to move in the 3 times gravity zone, she could barely accept it. But now, it seemed like Lin Tian had a relaxed expression. Lin Tian shrugged and said, Do you want to come in and try? No! Sushu flatly refused. She had just reached the 8th layer of the body refinement realm. If she entered the 3 times gravity zone, she would definitely suffer. Lin Tian smiled and didn't mind. He began to cultivate in the 3 times gravity zone. Because Sushu was here, he didn't take out the origin returning sword from the stone ring. After all, the stone ring was too rare. According to the normal price, it would cost at least 1.5 million spirit coins. If Sushu asked, he wouldn't know how to answer. In the blink of an eye, 8 hours passed. Lin Tian and Sushu walked out of the wild wave array. On the way back to their residence, Sushu looked at Lin Tian like she was looking at a monster. With a cultivation at the 8th layer of the body refinement realm, he could actually move freely in the 3 times gravity zone of the wild wave array. This was a bit too much. But there is still a big difference between you and the Divine Pulse realm. If you also cultivated for 2 years, how could Zhou Hao be your opponent? Sushu curled her lips. Regarding Lin Tian's monstrous level, she refreshed herself again and again. But even so, there was still a huge gap between the body refinement realm and the Divine Pulse realm. Lin Tian was now at the 8th layer of the body refinement realm. If an 8th layer of the body refinement realm wanted to defeat a Divine Pulse realm expert, it was simply impossible. Sushu's voice was very soft, but Lin Tian could still hear it clearly. If I cultivated for 2 years, I could crush him with a single finger, Lin Tian said. Sushu rolled her eyes. I'm talking about you and you're still panting. No, I'm just speaking the truth, Lin Tian said with a smile. A long time had passed since noon. At a fork in the road, Lin Tian and Sushu parted ways. Because the inner house selection competition was in 10 days, Sushu also had to prepare. After returning to his residence, Lin Tian washed up and entered his room to rest as usual. At night, he woke up on time and went to the top pavilion to inscribe spirit-gathering runes to cultivate. Divine Pulse Realm? 10 days later, when I step into the 9th layer of the body refinement realm, I might be able to win, Lin Tian thought to himself. A cold glint flashed in Lin Tian's eyes. He took a deep breath and started to cultivate seriously. After knowing that Zhou Hao had stepped into the Divine Pulse realm, Lin Tian more or less felt a trace of pressure. In the next few days, he no longer headed to the Wild Waves Heavy Formation. Instead, he frantically inscribed spirit-gathering runes to cultivate the 4 extremes scripture. In the past, he would only use 1 spirit-gathering rune each time he cultivated. But in these few days, he activated 3 spirit-gathering runes each time. In the blink of an eye, another 6 days passed. In these 6 days, other than resting and eating, Lin Tian cultivated all the time. On this day, in the middle of the night, Lin Tian sat cross-legged at the top pavilion. Resplendent starlight shone down and spirit chi surged from all directions, completely enveloping him. It was denser than ever before. Lin Tian closed his eyes tightly and couldn't help but frown. At this moment, the pain of tempering his organs suddenly increased by several times, as if 10,000 arrows were piercing his heart. Gradually, Lin Tian couldn't help but let out a dull groan. So painful! Lin Tian gritted his teeth. As the spirit chi of heaven and earth, and the rich power of stars enveloped him, another 15 minutes passed. Lin Tian's body rumbled with the sound of wind and thunder. At this moment, Lin Tian felt even more intense pain. However, he endured it. Buzz! On the surface of his body, silver light lingered and became denser. Just like that, another hour passed. Just as Lin Tian was about to be unable to endure this inhumane pain, the sound of wind and thunder in his body became even more violent. Boom! A majestic force surged and filled every corner of his body. The intense pain disappeared, and Lin Tian gasped for breath. After several breaths, he barely managed to recover. Standing up, Lin Tian felt his body become several times lighter. As he clenched his fist slightly, his strength became stronger. 9th level body refinement realm! After a slight comprehension, Lin Tian's eyes lit up. After 6 days of hard work and using a total of close to 100 spirit-gathering runes, he finally stepped into the 9th level body refinement realm. Trying to take deep breaths, Lin Tian realized that it was easier to breathe than before. Trying to hold his breath, he could already hold on for more than an hour. The body refinement realm was about to reach the end. Circulating the 4 extremes meridians again, Lin Tian realized that the true essence in his blood, flesh, tendons, bones, and organs formed a large circulation link, causing his true essence to become denser and his blood chi to become denser. Compared to the 8th level body refinement realm, my combat strength has increased by about 3 times, Lin Tian thought to himself. With a flash of light in his eyes, Lin Tian sat down cross-legged again and circulated the 4 extremes meridians, beginning to consolidate his 9th level body refinement realm cultivation. Cultivating martial arts was similar to building a house. The foundation was the most important. If the foundation wasn't solid, the later parts wouldn't be too stable. Lin Tian was very clear on this point. Therefore, every time he advanced, he would seriously consolidate his realm. Soon, the stars were hidden, and the morning sun shone down. Lin Tian walked down from the roof and returned to his room to rest for several hours. He only woke up in the afternoon. After eating a simple meal, Lin Tian walked towards the Wild Waves Formation. He stepped into the 3x gravity zone and began to cultivate the Azure Thunder Sword art. Kung! The ear-piercing sound of a sword rang out, and the sound of thunder spread in all directions. Outside the formation, Luo Xiao looked inside the Wild Waves Formation. Although he couldn't see Lin Tian's figure clearly, because he had seen it once in the 2x gravity zone, he could tell that it was Lin Tian just by hearing the sound. He was speechless for a moment. This little monster seems to have gotten stronger again. Seriously. Luo Xiao didn't know what to say. Lin Tian cultivated in the Wild Waves Formation for a total of 8 hours. 8 hours of cultivation caused his understanding of the Azure Thunder Sword art to become even more profound. After that, he walked out of the formation and returned to his room. After resting for a while, he began to cultivate the 4 extremes meridians. Time waits for no one. In the blink of an eye, the last 4 days had passed. In these 4 days, Lin Tian spent almost all of his time in the Wild Waves formation. On the 4th day, he could already barely enter the 4x gravity zone. As for the Azure Thunder Sword art, he had already completely mastered the remaining 30%. Now, every strike of his sword was comparable to a middle-level body refinement realm martial skill. It was shockingly strong. P.S. Sorry, I'm a bit stuck. The second update should be around 9 p.m. Chapter 77. Early in the morning, the sun shone on the earth. The air was fresh and the spirit energy was dense. Dong! On this day, the sound of a bell echoed throughout the 9-yang martial house. The sound lingered for a long time. The inner house selection had begun. In the disciples' dormitory area, Lin Tian heard the sound and his eyes flashed. He took out the origin restoring sword from the stone ring and tied it to his back. After informing Lin Shi, he walked towards the martial arts practice field. When he arrived at the martial arts practice field, it was already surrounded by people. Not all of these people were here to participate in the inner house selection. Because participating in the inner house selection required a certain amount of qualifications. Their cultivation had to be at least at the 7th level of the body refinement realm. Just this point alone was enough to sweep away most of the disciples. At least, among the hundreds of new disciples, only 2 or 3 people were qualified to participate in the inner house selection. Therefore, most of these people were here to watch the selection process. I heard that the rewards for this inner house selection are very rich. The first place in the overall results seems to be a divine accumulation pill. After a martial artist at the 9th level of the body refinement realm consumes it, they can directly enter the divine pulse realm. No way, they are willing to take out such a pill as a reward? Someone was surprised. It seems that the martial house is going all out this time. That's right. There are many geniuses among the outer house disciples this time. Naturally, the martial house will pay attention to it. It is said that other than the divine accumulation pill, there are other rich rewards that are extraordinary. However, there are only 5 spots for the inner house disciples. I don't know which 5 people will be the best this time. Many disciples gathered together in 2s and 3s. From time to time, there would be discussions. Among them, those who were not qualified to participate were envious and yearning. Those who were qualified to participate were full of anticipation and excitement. The reason for this was because there was a huge difference between the inner palace and the outer palace. Simply put, if one entered the inner palace, they would be able to obtain more cultivation resources. Entering the inner palace was also a kind of affirmation for the disciples of the martial house. Once they entered the inner palace, in the future, no matter where they went, they would be highly sought after. In the corner, Lin Tian was also startled when he heard these discussions. Divine accumulation pill? Lin Tian muttered to himself. However, to directly reach the divine vein realm from the 9th level of the refinement realm, this divine accumulation pill was truly astonishing. It was definitely more valuable than the 9 melody essence pill. Thinking about it, Lin Tian's eyes flickered. He couldn't help looking forward to it. If he could obtain the divine accumulation pill, wouldn't he be able to step into the divine vein realm? Similar to him, many disciples in the surroundings were also thinking about the divine accumulation pill. The divine accumulation pill, it can allow one to directly reach the divine vein realm from the 9th layer of the body refinement realm. It would be great if I could obtain this pill. Some people were filled with anticipation. Come on, stop daydreaming. Let's not talk about other things, but this divine accumulation pill has already been decided. Internally decided? What do you mean? Do you know that show how? It is said that this person has already advanced to the divine vein realm. He does not even need to participate in the test and can directly enter the inner palace. As for the first place prize, the divine accumulation pill, it will naturally be his in the end. What? He has already stepped into the divine pulse realm? Many people were shocked. The 9-young martial house had been established for hundreds of years. In the hundreds of years of history, the number of people who could reach the divine vein realm in the outer palace could be counted with one hand. How could Zhou Hao not be surprised that he had already reached the divine vein realm before entering the inner palace? Hearing this news, many disciples of the martial house widened their eyes. At this time, someone at the side raised a question. Since he has already entered the divine vein realm, wouldn't it be a waste to give the divine accumulation pill to Zhou Hao? Waste? How is that possible? Do you know the value of a divine accumulation pill? After Zhou Hao obtains the divine accumulation pill, he can take it to the treasure pavilion to auction. The transaction amount will be at least 2 million spirit coins, which is equivalent to a mid-grade artifact. A mid-grade artifact was enough to increase a martial artist's battle power by 80%. This Zhou Hao has already entered the divine vein realm. Even if he does not participate in the test, the martial house will still give the divine accumulation pill to him. This is a matter of course. I believe that no disciple of the martial house will have any objections. That is true, but I still feel that it is a waste. Wouldn't it be better if this divine accumulation pill was given to another disciple at the 9th layer of the body refinement realm? At least for the martial house, it is a good thing as they can nurture another divine vein realm disciple. I guess the martial house did not expect that someone could reach the divine vein realm before entering the inner palace. The reward has already been announced, so it is impossible to change it. The person who spoke rolled his eyes and said, "However, if you really feel that it is a waste, you can challenge him. As long as you win, the divine accumulation pill will naturally be yours." Challenge a divine vein realm expert? Isn't that just asking for humiliation? I was just saying it. Besides, I am only at the 6th layer of the body refinement realm. I am still far from the 9th layer of the body refinement realm. It's good that you know. In the field, voices came out one after another. Hearing these people's words, the corner of Lin Tian's mouth rose. The day of the bet with Zhou Hao happened to be the day of the inner palace selection. If he defeated Zhou Hao, the divine accumulation pill would be his. At this moment, there was a commotion in the crowd not far away. 2 young men walked over. The one in the lead was wearing a golden robe and had an imposing appearance. Zhou Hao. Many people were surprised and automatically opened up a path for him. The number 1 disciple of the outer palace, and he was also at the divine vein realm. Many people's faces were filled with awe. Zhou Hao walked over with another person beside him. He was wearing a green robe and had an extraordinary appearance. It was Lu Xing. Lin Tian raised his head and looked at Zhou Hao and Lu Xing. His eyes instantly turned cold. These 2 people were already on his blacklist. As if he felt Lin Tian's gaze, Zhou Hao looked over and said, "Brother Lin?" After pausing for a moment, Zhou Hao smiled and said, "When I saw Brother Lin being dragged away by the 100-legged beast during the outer palace trial, I was worried for a long time. Now that I see Brother Lin standing here safe and sound, I'm really relieved." "Relieved?" Lin Tiantan smiled. "Why do I feel like it's more of a disappointment? How could that be? Brother Lin must be joking." Zhou Hao's expression didn't change. Lin Tian narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhou Hao. He found that Zhou Hao's aura had indeed changed. It gave him a faint sense of oppression. He had indeed stepped into the divine vein realm. Many people in the surroundings noticed this and were shocked. Who is that young man with a long sword on his back? He can actually talk to that Zhou Hao. Damn! You don't even know this person? Is this person very famous? Nonsense! This person is called Lin Tian. He is a 9-star talent, and ranked first in the new disciple assessment. Not long ago, he was ranked 2nd in the outer palace selection, just below Zhou Hao. At that time, he had only entered the martial house for a month. So strong! If that's the case, won't this person be able to enter the inner palace in this inner palace selection? It's very possible. Although he is far from being comparable to Zhou Hao, he has at least a 70% chance of entering the inner palace. Many people were shocked. Some of the older disciples were embarrassed. A new disciple's fame actually suppressed their heads. Lin Tian naturally heard these discussions, but he didn't care at all. Tilting his head to look at Lu Xing, Lin Tian smiled faintly and said, "Speaking of which, when we met in the dark forest last time, you should have obtained a lot of benefits from my traces, right?" "I don't understand what you are talking about," Lu Xing said coldly. "Is that so?" Lin Tian said strangely. "After we met in the dark forest, didn't you tell the Mo family that I was in the dark forest? You should know that I have a grudge with the Mo family. The Mo family is trying to kill me by every means possible. If you tell the Mo family this news, you should get a handsome reward." Lu Xing snorted. "Don't measure the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. I, Lu Xing, am an indomitable spirit, and disdain to do such a thing. The Mo family going to the dark forest to kill you has nothing to do with me." "Oh? How did you know that the Mo family went to the dark forest to kill me? I don't think I mentioned this." Lin Tian narrowed his eyes. "Or is it that the Mo family's patriarch went to the dark forest to kill me, and he still has to report to you, Lu Xing?" Lu Xing was suddenly speechless, and his face became ugly. Lin Tianling smiled. "Heart of a gentleman? Indomitable spirit?" Staring at Lu Xing, a murderous intent brewed in his eyes. Facing such an icy gaze, Lu Xing could not help but tremble, and could not help but retreat. Right at this moment, in the martial arts practice field, another bell sounded. Dong! This bell sound was louder than the first. This bell sound was to summon the participants of the inner palace selection. Lin Tian looked towards the origin of the bell sound. There was a high platform there. This high platform had just been built, prepared for the inner palace disciple selection. After this bell sound, everyone here walked towards the high platform. Soon, this place became empty. Lin Tianling coldly swept a glance at Lu Xing, turned around, and left. "Brother Lin, wait a moment." Regarding this bell sound, Zhou Hao did not care much. He called out to Lin Tian, and said with a faint smile, "Speaking of which, we set the bet battle 3 months ago. Brother Lin, you shouldn't have forgotten, right?" Lin Tian stopped his footsteps, turned back to look at Zhou Hao, and narrowed his eyes slightly. After a moment, the corners of his mouth rose slightly. "Of course, I remember very clearly." "That's good," Zhou Hao said with a smile. "Then, this battle will be set after the inner palace disciple selection is confirmed. What do you think, Brother Lin?" Lin Tian stared at Zhou Hao, and after a while, the corners of his mouth became wider, but with a hint of evil. "What a coincidence, we thought of the same thing." After saying this, Lin Tian turned around and walked towards the high platform. Looking at Lin Tian's back, Lu Xing's eyes were filled with malice. "This stinking brat! Too arrogant!" Lu Xing clenched his fists. "Arrogant people don't live long, why be angry with him?" Zhou Hao said with a smile. Lu Xing was stunned. "Young Master Zhou, what do you mean?" Zhou Hao did not answer Lu Xing's question, and said with a smile on his face, "I just checked. His current cultivation is at the 9th firmament of body refinement." "What? How is that possible?" Lu Xing was shocked. He had been in the 9-yang martial house for more than a year, and now he had just reached the 8th firmament of body refinement. However, Lin Tian had only been in the martial house for 3 months, and now he had already reached the 9th firmament of body refinement. He actually surpassed him. With his current strength, he should be able to enter the inner palace. Zhou Hao's face was still smiling. Lu Xing put away his surprise, and looked at the smile on Zhou Hao's face. He revealed a puzzled expression, and carefully said, "Young Master Zhou, that I don't understand. That Lin Tian being able to enter the inner palace is not a good thing. Young Master Zhou, why do you look so happy?" Chapter 78. Lu Xing was startled, but he quickly understood. He was pleasantly surprised at first, but then his expression turned sinister. Lu Xing understood Zhou Hao's words. After Lin Tian obtained the inner palace spot, it would be time for him to duel with Zhou Hao. The two had already signed a life and death contract 3 months ago. In the duel, whether Zhou Hao crippled Lin Tian or killed Lin Tian, it would be a very normal thing to do. Now that Zhou Hao was in the Divine Vein realm, he could easily do either. Just as he was about to enter the inner palace, his status would increase, and his future would be wide and smooth. But if at this time, his martial physique was crippled in the duel, or even died in the duel, how regretful would that be? Falling from heaven to hell is far more despairing than falling directly to hell. Lu Xing laughed sinisterly. As expected of young Master Zhou. Zhou Hao's eyes were cold. You dare to approach the person I fancy. You're courting death. When he was in Greenwind Ridge, he had schemed to frame Lin Tian. That sword strike had already completely torn off all pretenses with Lin Tian. When he was in front of others, he would conceal it a little, but in front of his trusted aide, Lu Xing, he no longer concealed anything. On the high platform of the martial arts practice field, almost all the disciples were gathered here. On this day, the inner palace selection had begun. Not only were all the disciples from the outer palace here, even some from the inner palace had rushed here to personally watch. After all, after the inner palace selection, 5 people from the outer palace would enter the inner palace to cultivate. These 5 people would be their future competitors, so there was no harm in coming early to watch. Below the high platform, the crowd was slightly excited, and from time to time, there would be noises. Quiet! A cold shout came from the high platform, and as this voice fell, the crowd quickly quieted down. The one who spoke was a middle-aged man. This person glanced at the disciples and then continued. The inner palace selection, I won't say anything unnecessary. I will only talk about the rules. First, those who have reached the 7th level of body refinement can participate in the selection. Second, all those who have the qualifications to enter the inner martial cave, and those who can last for 2 hours in the cave are qualified. Third, all those who have passed the inner palace grotto will simultaneously participate in an indiscriminate mixed battle on this high platform. The final 4 winners will be able to enter the inner palace. As for the overall ranking of the 4, it will be determined by the ranking of the inner martial cave's assessment. The ranking of the inner martial cave will be recorded by the ranking stone outside the cave. After pausing for a moment, the middle-aged man said, The reason why the 4 of you are left behind is because there is already one person in the outer palace who has reached the Divine Vein realm. He doesn't need to participate in the assessment, and will be confirmed as the overall first place. Of course, if any of the 4 winners are unconvinced, they can issue a challenge to that person. If they win, the first place will change. In addition, for the sake of fairness, all participating disciples are only allowed to use ordinary weapons throughout the entire process. As soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, the crowd went into an uproar. Indeed, the rumors are true. Someone has stepped into the Divine Vein realm. To be able to step into the Divine Vein realm while still in the outer palace, this is terrifying. It is said that the final 4 victors can challenge anyone who is unconvinced. However, who would be so idiotic as to challenge a Divine Vein realm expert with a body refinement realm cultivation? Exactly. In other words, this selection is only a competition for the 2nd to 5th spots. Below the high platform, many disciples were whispering. At this moment, a dry cough was heard. On the high platform, someone walked out. It was the martial house's elder, Mu Qing. The inner palace selection was an important day, so the martial house's elders would naturally be present. Mu Qing's expression was calm as he looked at the disciples and said, Everyone, I wish you all the best. As soon as he finished speaking, Mu Qing went straight to the main topic. Now, the selection begins. All qualified disciples, head to the inner martial cave. Yes. Elder. Below the high platform, dozens of disciples responded in unison. There were close to 300 disciples in the 9 young martial houses' outer palace, and a total of 49 disciples had reached the 7th level of body refinement realm. Soon, these 49 disciples were led by the middle-aged man to the so-called Inner Martial Cave. The Inner Martial Cave was a huge mountain cave. Inside, there was a comprehensive formation array. The formation array covered an area of about a few hundred feet. Looking at the Inner Martial Cave, there was a strange stone that was about 10 feet tall. This must be the Inner Martial Cave's ranking stone. It can actually analyze the results of the disciples in the Inner Martial Cave and record their rankings. Truly amazing, Lin Tian thought to himself. The Inner Martial Cave was rumored to be composed of a small violent wave heavy array and a huge illusory killing array. The violent wave heavy array naturally pressured the disciples who entered, suppressing their strength and speed. As for the illusory killing array, it would create some demonic beasts to attack the disciples. Of course, the illusory killing array would not actually kill the disciples who entered. However, once the disciples were killed, they would be automatically sent out of the Inner Martial Cave by the array. After that, the ranking stone would use the disciples' time in the Inner Martial Cave as well as the level and number of demonic beasts they killed as a benchmark to rank them. Looking at the Inner Martial Cave in front of them, many disciples were surprised. Especially the 49 Outer Palace disciples who participated in the selection. Many of them clenched their fists. "Hey!" Lin Tian was patted by someone, and Sushu appeared beside him. Lin Tian looked at Sushu and was speechless. "You really came to join in the fun?" Sushu was currently at the 8th heavenly layer of body refinement, so she indeed had the qualifications to participate in the Inner Palace selections. However, Lin Tian knew that the reason this little girl participated in the Inner Palace selections was because she wanted to fight for Mu Qing's glory, just like last time during the Outer Palace ranking trial. As for the so-called cultivation resources of the Inner Palace, as well as the glory and status that came with being an Inner Palace disciple, Su Shu didn't care. After all, she was Mu Qing's last disciple. Just this point alone was enough for her to be proud of. In terms of status, how could an Inner Palace disciple compare to a martial house elder's last disciple? "What do you mean by joining in the fun? Don't you know how to speak properly?" Sushu ground her teeth. Lin Tian. At this moment, the middle-aged man coughed and looked at the crowd of disciples. "Now you can enter. After entering the Inner Martial Cave, those who can last for 2 hours will be considered to have passed this round of assessment. Otherwise, those who are teleported out within 2 hours will be considered to have failed." The middle-aged man swept his gaze over the dozens of disciples and raised his voice. "Everyone enter!" "Yes!" The disciples responded once again. There was only one door in the Inner Martial Cave. Looking from afar, the door flickered with brilliance, giving people a sense of mystery. "Let's go," Sushu said. Lin Tian nodded and followed Sushu as they slowly walked in. As soon as he stepped into the Inner Martial Cave, Lin Tian suddenly felt his vision darken. Then, a dim light flickered around him. Slightly stunned, Lin Tian realized that Sushu, who came in with him, had disappeared. He was the only one left in all directions. In this space, he could not see anyone else, nor could he see the scene outside the Inner Martial Cave. Buzz! Suddenly, the space changed again. Lin Tian suddenly felt his body sink. Lin Tian's heart skipped a beat. The gravity had increased. Slightly sensing, Lin Tian quickly realized that this gravity was between 2 and 3 times the normal gravity. For the current him, it was nothing. Under this gravity, he could move freely. Of course, even so, his combat power would still be suppressed. After all, this was not the outside world. Following a roar, a demonic beast gradually condensed in front of him. "This is the demonic beast formed by the illusory killing array?" Lin Tian whispered. Looking at this demonic beast, Lin Tianyi determined its level. It was an early 2nd level demonic beast, comparable to the 4th level of the refinement realm. The demonic beast roared and rushed towards Lin Tian. "This illusory killing array is really realistic." Lin Tian was shocked. When the demonic beast rushed over, he could even feel its breathing. It was as if this demonic beast was a real entity. While he was thinking, the demonic beast had already rushed in front of him. Without hesitation, Lin Tian raised his sword and cut it in half. The long sword in his hand was given to him by the martial house before the assessment. It was an ordinary long sword. The other disciples who participated in the assessment were also given weapons of the same level. After cutting down this demonic beast, Lin Tian stood still and did not move. In the next moment, another roar sounded. This time, a total of 5 demonic beasts condensed. Moreover, these 5 demonic beasts were all at the peak of the 2nd level, comparable to the 6th level of the refinement realm. Roar! With a loud roar, the 5 demonic beasts surrounded Lin Tian. However, Lin Tian's current strength was extremely strong. With his cultivation at the 9th level of the refinement realm, how could he care about a few 2nd level demonic beasts? Seeing the 5 demonic beasts rushing over, Lin Tian did not move and still casually swung his sword. Pooh! 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 In the blink of an eye, the 5 demonic beasts were completely killed. However, everything did not end there. After Lin Tian killed these 5 2nd-level demonic beasts, more demonic beasts condensed out of thin air. There were a total of 10 demonic beasts, each of them at the peak of the 2nd level, and all of them were extremely ferocious. In this regard, Lin Tian's expression was very calm. His hand raised and his sword fell. Pooh! 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 Blood splashed in this dark space. Soon, the 10 demonic beasts were killed one by one. It seems that in the inner martial cave, the demonic beasts formed by the illusionary killing array will slowly increase in level and quantity. This will work together with the wild wave array to deplete the true essence of the examinee. In the end, the examinee will either be killed due to exhaustion of true essence or insufficient strength. In short, they will all die and then be transported out. Lin Tian thought to himself. However, just based on the demonic beast level, there should not be any 4th-level demonic beasts. The inner martial cave was set up to select inner martial disciples from the outer martial cave. The outer martial disciples were all at the refinement realm, so naturally, there would not be any 4th-level demonic beasts in the inner martial cave. As for people like Zhou Hao who had reached the divine pulse realm in the outer martial cave, these people did not need to participate in the assessment, and could directly enter the inner martial cave. Just as Lin Tian finished thinking, an even more shocking roar sounded. In front of him, a demonic beast covered in scales appeared. Its eyes were blood red and its evil aura was shocking. This was a middle-level 3rd-level demonic beast, comparable to the 8th level of the refinement realm. As expected, Lin Tian whispered. Without hesitation, Lin Tian waved the long sword in his hand and rushed out like lightning, slashing towards the demonic beast's throat. Chapter 79. Seeing Lin Tian rushing towards it, the demonic beast roared and a sharp barb extended from its tail towards Lin Tian. However, Lin Tian's speed was too fast. In a flash, he disappeared and the long sword in his hand slashed through the demonic beast's throat. Puff! The demonic beast's head flew out and blood gushed out. Killing a mid-level level 3 demonic beast in one move was considered normal. The current Lin Tian had such strength. Roar! Angry roars sounded again. This time, more than 10 mid-level level 3 demonic beasts appeared. Lin Tian rushed into the group of demonic beasts and flipped the long sword in his hand. In this area where the gravity was close to 2.5 times, the long sword swung freely. Streaks of sword chi crisscrossed, and each sword accurately pierced the throat of a demonic beast. A one-hit kill! It saved time and effort. Because the inner martial cave also had the wild waves heavy array, the consumption of true origin energy was much faster than the outside world. Lin Tian knew this very well. Therefore, when he attacked the demonic beasts, his movements were very skillful. He would not waste his energy if he could save it. Until now, he had been attacking with ordinary sword moves and did not use any martial arts techniques. Soon, Lin Tian killed more than 10 mid-level level 3 demonic beasts. The area was temporarily quiet. However, it was only for a moment. After about a few breaths, along with a fierce roar, a ghost-like figure appeared in front of Lin Tian. This figure was wrapped in a gray robe and looked like the legendary ghost. It made one's scalp tingle. Peak level 3 demonic beast, red-faced ghost. We meet again. Lin Tian narrowed his eyes. The red-faced ghost let out a screeching sound like glass rubbing against each other. Its eyes were blood-red like a ghost's. With a roar, it charged towards Lin Tian. It was clearly just an illusion, but Lin Tian felt a wave of oppressive cold air. Crouching down slightly, Lin Tian's eyes were like torches as he stared at the red-faced ghost's throat. The illusionary killing array was different from the illusionary realm during the entrance exam. Although both were illusions, there were still some differences. The illusions in the illusionary killing array could only scare people. If one had a firm will and stood still, all the illusions would disappear. However, the illusionary killing array was different. If one did not put up any resistance, they would only be killed and transported out of the inner martial cave. Finally, the red-faced ghost approached and swiped at Lin Tian with its claws. It was also at this moment that Lin Tian moved. His body rushed out like lightning. Swish! With a light sound, Lin Tian and the red-faced ghost brushed past each other. Immediately, the red-faced ghost let out a blood-curdling scream as his throat was pierced by a sword. With a bang, he fell into a pool of blood. The red-faced ghost's weakness was the throat. This was something that Lin Tian already knew back in the Green Wind Ridge. Now that his cultivation had reached the 9th level of the body refinement realm, he didn't need to fear the red-faced ghost in a direct battle, not to mention the red-faced ghost's sword of lightning. Rumble! A loud shaking sound rang out, and the entire space started to vibrate. Immediately, several peak grade 3 demonic beasts appeared in front of Lin Tian. Come on! Lin Tian said in a deep voice. After saying that, Lin Tian took a deep breath. Immediately, his sword moved and stabbed in all directions. Unknowingly, more than half an hour had passed. During this period of time, there were disciples who were transported out of the inner martial cave. Most of these people who were transported out had pale faces. Immediately after, they disappeared into the crowd. Almost all of these people were killed by the demonic beasts in the inner martial cave before being transported out. Although they didn't really die, they still experienced the feeling of death. How many of them wouldn't be afraid? Of course, there were some brave people among them. Although their faces were pale, they weren't afraid. It's too difficult. Fighting in there feels like carrying a huge rock. No, it feels like my whole body is filled with mercury. Even waving my hand is troublesome. Moreover, the demonic beasts keep jumping out. It's really so difficult, someone complained. These people were mostly old disciples, and their cultivations were at the 7th level of the refinement realm. Although they had tempered themselves in the wild waves heavy array, it was only in the 2 times gravity zone. However, the gravity in the inner martial cave was much stronger than the 2 times gravity zone. Suddenly entering it, these people were not used to it. Adding on the fact that these people had never truly battled under the multiple times gravity before, it was very difficult for these people to endure for more than 2 hours in the inner martial cave. In the blink of an eye, 2 hours passed. In 2 hours, out of the 49 disciples who entered the inner martial cave, 23 of them were transported out. Out of 49 people who entered, 26 passed. Not bad. Mu Qing nodded. Sherdong smiled. I wonder how long that little guy can last. I'm really looking forward to it. Same. Mu Qing smiled. The two of them stood in the distance and looked in the direction of the inner martial cave. From the inner martial cave, the participating disciples could not see the outside world. It was the same for the outside world. They could not see the scene inside the inner martial cave. Mu Qing and Sherdong stood together and stared in the direction of the inner martial cave's main entrance. Once a disciple was killed in the inner martial cave, they would be transported out from the main entrance. Other than Mu Qing and Sherdong, there were also people watching from all directions. He passed the second round. Zhou Hao had a smile on his face. However, under this smile, there was a sinister light. At this moment, Lin Tian was facing 5 peak 3rd grade demonic beasts. These demonic beasts were not weaker than the red-faced ghost. He squatted down slightly, and the long sword in his hand shook. He finally used the power of a martial technique. Shocking Wind Sword. With one slash, a dense sword aura appeared. Pooh! 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 The 5 peak 3rd grade demonic beasts were killed and fell into a pool of blood. Lin Tian's expression changed slightly. In the inner martial cave, this slash consumed a lot more true origin than in the outside world. Narrowing his eyes, Lin Tian took a deep breath and stood still with his sword in his hand. I have to save more energy in true origin, Lin Tian thought to himself. With a buzz, the surrounding space trembled. This time, a total of 10 peak 3rd grade demonic beasts appeared. Outside the inner martial cave, one disciple after another was teleported out. 3.5 hours had passed. Out of the 26 people who passed, 17 have been teleported out. Now there are only 9 people left. Mu Qing said. Your precious disciple is still inside. She must have given you some face, right? Sherdong laughed. Mu Qing was a little helpless. What face? I'm satisfied as long as this girl is quiet. As the two of them chatted and laughed, another 5 people were teleported out. At this moment, there were only 4 people left in the inner martial cave. Ah! A crisp sound was heard. Sushu was teleported out. She grimaced and shrunk her neck. Obviously, she was shocked. Seeing this scene, Sherdong couldn't help but laugh. This girl is looking for trouble. It doesn't feel good to be killed by demonic beasts. Mu Qing shook his head and said, No matter what this girl is here for, there's no harm in entering once. That's true. Sherdong nodded. Time continued to move forward. Soon, the 4th last person was teleported out. There are only 3 people left. Hui Yongchang, the 4th outer house, Rongxiu, and that Lin Tian. Around them, the mentors were discussing. Speaking of which, forget about Hui Yongchang and Rongxiu, they both cultivated in the outer house for 2 years. However, this Lin Tian is really a monster. In such a short time, he actually ranked 2nd in the outer house and lasted so long in the inner martial cave. 9-star talent, how can he not be a monster? That's true. After all, he's a 9-star talent. Many people nodded. Many people stared in the direction of the inner martial cave. Soon, Rongxiu and Hui Yongchang were teleported out. There's only one person left. Someone whispered. At this moment, 4 hours had passed since the disciples entered the inner martial cave. That Lin Tian. He's still inside. Some mentors said. Sushu stared in the direction of the inner martial cave and curled her lips. What a little monster. Lin Tian had only entered the martial house for 3 months, yet he had already reached his current level. He had completely surpassed her, causing her to feel very depressed. In the distance, Sherdong and Mu Qing stared ahead and narrowed their eyes slightly. Sherdong, how long do you think that kid can last? Mu Qing asked. Sherdong thought for a moment. With that little guy's talent and strength, he should be able to last for another hour. Mu Qing shook his head and said, I have a feeling that he can last longer. Longer? It can't be. Sherdong was surprised. Just now, he had said that Lin Tian would be able to hold on for another hour because he had a good impression of Lin Tian, so he had estimated a bit more time. He never thought that Mu Qing would actually say that Lin Tian would be able to hold on for even longer. I'm not sure. I just have a feeling. Let's wait and see, Mu Qing said. Inside the inner martial cave, Lin Tian was surrounded by 11 peak rank 3 demonic beasts. His breathing was slightly chaotic. In these 2 hours, he had killed a lot of monster beasts. Because he was fighting under 5 times the gravity, the true essence in his body was severely depleted. He had already consumed more than half of it, but even so, his expression was still calm and steady. Come! Staring at the 11 peak rank 3 demonic beasts, Lin Tian said in a deep voice. As if they felt Lin Tian's provocation, the 11 peak rank 3 demonic beasts roared and charged at him in anger. Lin Tian took a deep breath and dodged the charge of a rank 3 demonic beast. His right hand turned around and pierced through the demonic beast's forehead. At the same time, he squatted down and dodged the attack of another demonic beast. His right leg kicked out, and the demonic beast that was charging at him was sent flying. Its throat was crushed, and it died instantly. Azure Thunder Sword Art! With a low shout, Lin Tian waved his right hand and a thunderous sword roar resounded in all directions. The Azure Thunder Sword Art was extremely overbearing. Once the sword was drawn, it would take a life. Pooh! 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 The sword in Lin Tian's hand seemed to have turned into a lightning beam. Even his movements became faster. Every time he waved his sword, a demonic beast would die under his sword. Soon, the 11 demonic beasts were all killed. However, with a fierce roar, more demonic beasts appeared. Lin Tian did not dodge and face them head-on. Demonic beasts and human martial artists were different, after all. Generally speaking, human martial artists were stronger than demonic beasts of the same level. After all, human martial artists were far more intelligent than demonic beasts. In addition, the demonic beasts created by the illusionary killing array were weaker than the actual demonic beasts. That was why Lin Tian could last until now and continuously kill so many rank 3 demonic beasts. Of course, to say that human martial artists were stronger than demonic beasts was only applicable to demonic beasts that had not transformed. It was different for demonic beasts that had successfully transformed. Demonic beasts that had successfully transformed were mostly stronger than human martial artists of the same level. Moreover, their strength was not just by a little bit. Very quickly, another hour passed. After an hour, Lin Tian was still in the inner martial cave and had not been sent out. Staring ahead, Shudong was a little surprised. How is it? Like I said. Mu Qing smiled. Shudong shook his head and smiled bitterly in front of Lin Tian. Time passed by minute. Soon, another hour had passed. At this moment, outside the inner martial cave, everyone was shocked, including Zhou Hao, who was not far away. 8 hours had passed, and Lin Tian was still in the inner martial cave. How is it possible? At that time, there were many disciples in the 9th level body refinement realm who entered the inner martial cave, but they only lasted for 4 hours at most. Even the martial arts maniac Emoji was no exception. But this Lin Tian is still inside. Some mentors were shocked. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.